Hey guys, tonight's we begin with an era that claims it hates pleasure, fears excitement, and mistrusts joy, while quietly inventing some of the most unhinged entertainment humanity has ever produced. You are about to wander through parlors filled with fainting couches, cemeteries treated like picnic grounds, and living rooms where polite adults intentionally scare themselves for sport. This is Victorian fun, where everything looks restrained on the surface and absolutely feral underneath. You are not sneaking into history tonight. History is waving you inside and asking if you would like to watch something deeply inappropriate but educational. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You arrive politely. That is the first rule. Victorian life does not begin with a bang. It begins with a nod, a straight back, and the quiet agreement that everyone will pretend this all makes sense. You are dressed properly, breathing carefully, and already slightly tired. Respectability hangs on you like a stiff coat, heavy, necessary, and deeply suspicious of comfort. Around you, people move with purpose, or at least the appearance of it, because nothing terrifies this century more than looking idle. Free time exists here, but it is treated like an unstable substance. Too much of it, and you might think, feel, or worse, enjoy yourself. So leisure is carefully controlled, filtered through manners, etiquette, and a shared understanding that fun must never look like fun. It must be disguised as education, moral improvement, or mild suffering. Anything else would be improper, and impropriety is the true crime of the age. You quickly learn that boredom is considered dangerous. An idle mind, they say, invites weakness, indulgence, and questions no one wants answered. So the Victorians get creative, not joyful creative, anxious creative. They invent activities that keep the hands busy and the soul quietly unsettled. You do not relax here. You participate. In drawing rooms lit by gaslight that flickers just enough to keep your nerves alert, people gather to do things no one questions aloud. They sit very close without touching. They speak softly about nothing in particular. They smile just enough to be polite, never enough to be sincere. This is leisure. This is entertainment. This is survival. You notice how often everyone is watching everyone else. Fun is not private. It is performative. Your posture matters. Your reactions matter. Laugh too hard, and you look unrefined. Laugh too little, and you look cold. The correct response is a controlled amusement, a practiced softness, as if joy itself must be rationed. Somewhere nearby, a group is organizing an evening activity. It involves guests, refreshments, and an inexplicable amount of seriousness. No one explains why it exists. It simply does. And that is enough. You nod along, because nodding is safer than asking questions. Asking questions suggests curiosity, and curiosity leads to opinions, and opinions lead to social exile. This is polite madness, the art of behaving while quietly unraveling. Everyone insists they are perfectly fine. Everyone looks faintly exhausted. Corsets are tightened, collars adjusted, teacups lifted with surgical precision. The body is restrained so the mind does not wander. The mind is restrained so the heart does not misbehave. You begin to see the pattern. Every strange pastime, every unsettling diversion, every oddly specific hobby is a pressure valve, a way to release something without admitting it exists. Fear, desire, frustration, boredom. These are unacceptable emotions, so they are repackaged as games, rituals, and traditions. Nothing is wrong, because nothing is acknowledged. Even laughter feels dangerous here. It escapes in short bursts, quickly smothered. When it lasts too long, people glance around, checking for witnesses. Enjoyment must be plausible deniability. If asked, you are not having fun. You are enriching yourself. You are learning. You are participating in society. The strange part is that it works. Sort of. The structure holds, just barely. Underneath the layers of politeness, something restless stirs. You can feel it in the way conversations drift toward the morbid, the way entertainment leans toward discomfort, the way silence stretches until someone fills it with something deeply odd. This is not accidental. This is design. Victorian respectability is not natural. It is maintained constantly, like a delicate machine that needs to be wound with rituals, rules, and distractions. Free time becomes the enemy because free time allows reflection, and reflection invites honesty. Honesty is unacceptable, so instead, they build a world where even leisure requires effort. You start to understand why everything feels slightly off. This is a society holding itself together with posture and routines, terrified of what might happen if anyone slouches emotionally. Fun becomes elaborate, theatrical, and oddly exhausting. It is not meant to restore you. It is meant to occupy you. As you stand there, blending in, performing normalcy, you realize something quietly unsettling. This is not a people who lack imagination. This is a people with too much of it, forced into narrow channels. When imagination cannot roam freely, it turns inward, twists, and finds strange outlets. And this is only the beginning. Because once you accept that fun must be disguised, suffering must be polite, and boredom must be avoided at all costs, you open the door to an entire century of activities that make perfect sense here and absolutely nowhere else. Welcome to Victorian leisure. Please keep your hands inside the madness at all times. You are taught early that boredom is not neutral. It is not a pause or a rest. It is a moral failure waiting to happen. An empty afternoon is a crack in the wall, and through that crack might slip laziness, impropriety, or worse, an original thought. So you learn the art of being bored correctly, which means never admitting you are bored at all. Here, idleness is treated like a fever. If you feel it coming on, you are expected to take immediate action. You do not lie down. You do not stare out a window. You certainly do not ask yourself how you feel. You find an activity, any activity, preferably one that involves rules, equipment, and at least a faint suggestion of moral benefit. The stranger it looks, the better, because difficulty implies discipline, and discipline implies virtue. You are encouraged to improve yourself constantly. Improvement does not mean happiness, it means effort. You embroider microscopic flowers onto cloth no one will ever examine closely. You copy passages from books you have already read, not to learn them, but to keep your hands occupied and your thoughts supervised. You practice musical instruments badly for years, because stopping would suggest contentment, and contentment is dangerously close to satisfaction. Every pastime must justify its existence. Leisure for leisure's sake is suspicious, so amusements are wrapped in noble language. Games become exercises of character. Hobbies become demonstrations of patience. Even absurd activities are framed as character building. If something feels pointless, that is simply proof it is working. You notice how often people brag about how busy they are. Not productive busy, but occupied busy. They recount long evenings spent doing things that sound exhausting and vaguely unnecessary, and everyone nods approvingly. Being overwhelmed is fashionable. Being rested is not. When boredom threatens, society responds with invention. Entire categories of entertainment spring up solely to prevent people from sitting quietly with themselves. Parlor games that last hours and test emotional restraint. Social visits that require preparation, rivaling military campaigns. Even walking becomes an event, complete with correct routes, outfits, and post-walk discussions about the walk itself. You learn to fear stillness. Silence stretches too far here. When it lingers, someone fills it with a comment, an observation, or an activity suggestion that makes no sense but sounds purposeful. No one wants to be the person caught doing nothing. Doing nothing implies thinking, and thinking without structure is a slippery slope. Self-improvement becomes the perfect disguise. You can do almost anything if you insist it is making you better. Staring contests become lessons in focus. Memorizing useless facts becomes mental sharpening. Enduring tedious rituals becomes a test of character. The goal is not enjoyment. The goal is endurance with a straight face. You realize that boredom is treated the same way illness is. People talk about it in hushed tones, offer remedies, and warn others not to catch it. If someone appears restless, suggestions pour in immediately. Perhaps they should take up collecting something obscure. Perhaps they should attend more lectures. Perhaps they should join a club dedicated to a very specific interest no one fully understands. The irony is that all this effort does not eliminate boredom. It transforms it. Boredom becomes elaborate. It wears costumes. It hosts events. It fills calendars. People are still bored, but now they are bored together, formally, with tea. You begin to sense that these amusements are not meant to entertain so much as contain. They keep emotions neatly boxed. They give people something to point at and say, "This is what I do," instead of "this is what I feel." It is safer to master a pointless skill than to confront a quiet dissatisfaction. Sometimes, late in the evening, when the activities finally end, you catch a glimpse of something honest, a sigh held too long, a gaze that drifts, a moment where someone looks almost relieved that the performance is over. Then it disappears, replaced by polite conversation and plans for tomorrow's distractions. Being bored correctly means never letting boredom look like boredom. It means converting it into tasks, habits, and traditions that fill the hours without asking too much of the heart. You are not escaping emptiness. You are decorating it. And the truly impressive part is how convincing it all feels. You are busy. You are improving. You are doing exactly what is expected of you. You are also, quietly, deeply bored. But no one will ever know. You enter the room quietly, because grief has acoustics. The curtains are drawn even though it is daytime, and the air smells faintly of flowers that are already starting to give up. Everyone is dressed in shades that suggest sorrow without demanding sincerity. Black, charcoal, deep violet, the approved palette of respectable despair. You take your seat and immediately understand that this is not a gathering to process loss. This is a gathering to perform it. Victorian mourning is not spontaneous. It is structured. There are rules, expectations, and an unspoken hierarchy. You are not here to feel. You are here to demonstrate that you know how to feel correctly. Sadness is a social skill, and like all skills in this era, it is judged quietly and relentlessly. Conversation begins in hushed tones, but it does not take long to realize no one is talking about the deceased in any meaningful way. Names are mentioned like credentials. Dates are recited with precision. Relationships are clarified because proximity to death matters. How close you were determines how entitled you are to visible suffering. Distant cousins are expected to look solemn but functional. Immediate family members are expected to look like they might collapse at any moment, but politely. You watch faces carefully. Some people have perfected the soft, hollow stare. Others deploy controlled sighs at strategic intervals. A few dab their eyes without disturbing their makeup, which is a genuine achievement and earns subtle admiration. There is an entire language here, spoken without words, and you are expected to be fluent. What surprises you is how competitive it feels. Grief is compared, though never directly. Someone mentions they have not slept in days. Someone else gently counters that they have not eaten. A third person says nothing, but looks thinner than last week, which is a bold move and does not go unnoticed. This is mourning as social theater, and everyone knows their lines. You learn quickly that too much emotion is frowned upon. Loud sobbing is gauche. It draws attention away from the collective atmosphere and makes others uncomfortable. This is not about release, it is about restraint. The ideal mourner is visibly devastated, but still capable of thanking guests and commenting on the weather. There are accessories involved: mourning jewelry containing hair from the deceased, handkerchiefs embroidered with initials, lockets worn openly to invite inquiry without requiring explanation. These objects are not just keepsakes, they are evidence, proof that you are invested in this loss and intend to carry it properly. Food is served, because hunger does not excuse bad manners. You eat carefully, aware that appetite can be interpreted as emotional failure. Too much interest in refreshments suggests resilience, and resilience is suspicious this early. Still, refusing food entirely might look theatrical. The balance is delicate. A few polite bites, followed by a quiet comment about having no appetite lately. This is the safe middle ground. At some point, stories are shared, not joyful memories. Those come later, if ever. These are stories designed to reinforce sorrow, last conversations, unfinished sentences, missed goodbyes. Each anecdote lands like a carefully placed weight, deepening the room's collective heaviness. You notice how people listen not just for content, but for impact. The most effective stories leave a silence behind them. You begin to understand that mourning here is not only about honoring the dead, it is about affirming the living. Participating correctly proves that you belong. It shows you understand loss, hierarchy, and decorum. It reassures everyone that when your turn comes, you will be mourned properly too. There are subtle consequences for missteps. Someone laughs accidentally, startled by a nervous reflex, and the room stiffens. Someone else speaks too casually about the future, and a nearby eyebrow lifts. Notes are taken mentally. Reputations are adjusted. And yet, beneath the performance, something genuine flickers now and then. A hand held a second too long, a voice that cracks unexpectedly, a moment where the mask slips just enough to reveal actual pain. These moments are brief and quickly contained, but they remind you that beneath all this structure, loss still hurts. Still, the system persists. Grief is measured, managed, and displayed with care. There are timelines for mourning close, acceptable durations for visible sorrow, and gradual permissions to return to normal life. Deviate too much in either direction, and you risk judgment. As the gathering winds down, people depart quietly, satisfied that the appropriate level of sadness has been achieved. Compliments are implied rather than spoken. You did well. You looked affected, but not unstable. You participated without overshadowing anyone else. This is what passes for success here. You leave the room, carrying not just sympathy, but an odd sense of accomplishment. You have mourned correctly, and somehow, that feels stranger than the loss itself. You arrive at the cemetery dressed for leisure, which feels like the first quiet joke of the afternoon. The path is neatly kept, the headstones arranged with the kind of order that suggests even the dead are expected to behave. You carry a basket, a folded blanket, and the calm confidence of someone who has been told this is perfectly normal. No one whispers, no one rushes. This is not a place of fear. This is a place of recreation. You choose a spot carefully, because etiquette still applies. Not too close to a fresh grave, that would be insensitive. Not too far from the older ones either, because age grants a certain social distance. The dead here are not strangers. They are neighbors, ancestors, conversation starters. You lay out your blanket between two headstones whose inscriptions have faded just enough to be considered historical rather than personal. Around you, other families do the same. Children run along the paths, careful not to trip over grief. Couples stroll arm in arm, discussing the weather, the bread, the relative quality of different cemeteries. Someone has brought a small dog, which is currently sniffing at eternity with great enthusiasm. This is not mourning. This is a day out. You sit and unpack your meal. Sandwiches wrapped in cloth, pastries prepared that morning. A thermos of tea poured with the same care it would receive in a drawing room. There is nothing macabre about the process. The setting is simply convenient, quiet, green, and reliably uncrowded. The dead, after all, are famously uncompetitive for space. Conversation flows easily. You talk about recent events, minor annoyances, plans for the coming week. Occasionally, someone gestures vaguely at a nearby headstone while telling a story about the person buried there, but it is more anecdote than elegy. Death here is not an interruption. It is background decor. You begin to understand that cemeteries serve a practical purpose in Victorian life. They are among the few places where silence is guaranteed without requiring explanation. No one questions why you are calm here. No one expects excitement. The presence of death lowers the bar for enthusiasm in a way that feels almost comforting. There is also a subtle pleasure in proximity. Sitting among graves reminds you that life continues. You chew thoughtfully, sip your tea, and feel very alive in comparison. This is not disrespect. This is perspective. The Victorians love perspective, especially when it reinforces endurance. Children are encouraged to behave, not because the dead might mind, but because this is a lesson. Death is not hidden from them. It is introduced gently, alongside biscuits and sunshine. They learn early that mortality is part of the landscape, something to be acknowledged without drama. The real fear would be ignoring it entirely. Some people read, some sketch monuments, a few nap, trusting that the eternal quiet will not be disturbed. It is oddly peaceful. You notice how the atmosphere diffuses tension. Arguments feel inappropriate here. Raised voices would echo too loudly against the stone. The cemetery enforces civility better than any parlor ever could. You also notice how carefully people perform respect while relaxing. No one sits directly on a grave. No one leans against a headstone. Boundaries are maintained, even in leisure. The dead are included in the outing, but never inconvenienced by it. At some point, laughter breaks out nearby. It is soft, quickly contained, but unmistakable. No one looks shocked. This is allowed. Laughter does not offend the dead, because the dead are no longer in a position to object. This unspoken logic makes the cemetery one of the safest places to feel things without consequence. There is something faintly rebellious about enjoying yourself here, even though it is entirely sanctioned. You are doing something that looks wrong but is socially approved. The Victorians excel at this contradiction. They take the forbidden and normalize it through repetition and etiquette. As the afternoon wanes, people begin to pack up. Crumbs are brushed away. Blankets are folded. The dead are left undisturbed, as they always are. You take one last look around, at the stones, the trees, the ordinary miracle of a space where life and death coexist without conflict. Walking away, you feel lighter than expected. The cemetery has done its work. It has reminded you that life is temporary, which somehow makes the sandwich taste better. You do not leave with dread. You leave with contentment, a full stomach, and the quiet understanding that even among the dead, the living find ways to pass the time politely. You are invited into the parlor with a smile that feels just a little too eager. The furniture is arranged in a way that suggests intimacy rather than comfort. Chairs pulled close, lamps turned low, curtains drawn like the room itself is trying to listen. Someone announces a game, and the word game does a lot of heavy lifting here. This is not about fun. This is about endurance, curiosity, and the quiet thrill of watching other people unravel politely. You take your seat and immediately sense the danger. Parlor games in Victorian society are social experiments disguised as entertainment. They promise harmless amusement and deliver emotional exposure with lace trim. Everyone agrees to play because refusing would look rude, and rudeness is worse than humiliation. The rules are explained carefully, which should have been your first warning. These games always come with rules, complicated ones, rules that require honesty, imagination, or both. Someone begins by asking a question that sounds innocent enough, something about preferences or memories, but the room tightens as answers are given. Every response is weighed. Every hesitation is noted. You realize quickly that these games are designed to extract information. Secrets surface not because anyone wants them to, but because the structure demands participation. Declining to answer is allowed in theory, but in practice it marks you as suspicious. What are you hiding? Why are you uncomfortable? Why are you ruining the mood? The questions escalate. Hypotheticals become personal. Scenarios drift into territory no one would normally discuss aloud. Who would you trust most? Who would you fear losing? Who would you choose if you had to choose? Laughter ripples through the room, but it is nervous, brittle, the sound people make when they are trying not to reveal too much. Someone across from you answers too honestly. The room freezes for half a breath. Eyes flicker. A relationship shifts in real time. The game continues anyway, because stopping would require acknowledging discomfort, and that is never done directly. There are physical games too, ones that involve endurance or composure, staring contests that last long enough to make people sway, balance games that require standing far too close to acquaintances, activities where fainting is not just possible, but expected. When someone does swoon, they are caught, seated, and quietly admired for their commitment to the experience. You notice how quickly alliances form and fracture. A glance shared, a smirk misunderstood, a truth revealed accidentally. These games do not end when the rules say they do. They linger. They resurface later in conversations, in silences, in the way people avoid certain topics or each other entirely. What makes it worse is the insistence that this is all harmless. It is just a game. No one meant anything by it. If feelings are hurt, that is unfortunate, but surely unrelated. The Victorians are very good at separating cause from effect when it suits them. You play your part carefully. You answer truthfully enough to appear sincere, vaguely enough to protect yourself. You laugh when appropriate. You maintain eye contact without inviting scrutiny. This is a skill, and not everyone has it. Those who lack it tend to suffer. As the evening progresses, the games grow more elaborate. Charades that feel less like guessing and more like public interpretation. Word games that require quick thinking and reveal far too much about how your mind works. Each activity peels back another layer of social armor. By the end of the night, the room feels different, heavier, charged. Friendships have been tested, not always successfully. Couples exchange glances that carry questions they will not ask until later. Someone leaves early, citing a headache that everyone politely believes. You stand to leave, thanked warmly for your participation. Compliments are exchanged. The evening is declared a success, and in a way, it is. Information has been gathered. Dynamics have shifted. Everyone has learned something they cannot unlearn. Walking home, you replay moments in your mind. Things said, things not said. The Victorians call this stimulating. They call it social engagement. They do not call it what it is, emotional fencing with no protective gear. The next time you are invited to a parlor game, you will accept with a smile, and you will be just a little more careful about where you sit. You are told it is good for you. That is how it always starts. Laughter, you are informed, strengthens the lungs, lifts the spirit, and reminds the body it is still alive. No one mentions that it can also knock you unconscious if pursued with enough enthusiasm. In Victorian society, this is not a warning. It is a challenge. You gather in a drawing room, already thick with anticipation. Chairs are arranged in a loose circle, close enough to feel communal but far enough apart to allow for collapse. Someone clears their throat and announces the purpose of the evening, an exercise in mirth, a test of composure, a harmless amusement. Everyone nods solemnly, because nothing says harmless like a room full of adults preparing to laugh themselves senseless on purpose. The rules are simple, which should concern you. Someone begins to tell a story. It is not especially funny at first. That is intentional. The humor creeps in sideways, absurd details piling up, pauses stretched just long enough to unsettle. The goal is not a quick laugh. The goal is sustained laughter, endurance laughter, the kind that starts in the chest and refuses to leave. At first, people laugh politely, controlled chuckles, a hand raised to the mouth. This is the acceptable opening phase. But the story continues. winding into nonsense, contradictions, and exaggerated seriousness. Someone snorts unexpectedly. Another person gasps for air. The room shifts. What was polite becomes contagious. You feel it spread like a ripple. Laughter jumps from person to person, feeding on itself. The more someone tries to stop, the worse it gets. That is part of the sport. Composure is admirable, but collapse is victory. When someone doubles over, clutching their ribs, the room erupts with approval. Victorians love rules, and this has them too. You are not supposed to help someone who is losing control. Sympathy breaks the spell. You let them laugh. You let them shake. If they slide out of their chair and onto the carpet, someone will fetch smelling salts later. For now, this is success. The storyteller presses on, voice wavering as they struggle not to laugh themselves. That struggle only makes it funnier. The audience feeds off it. Laughter escalates into wheezing, into tears, into the kind of silent shaking that looks alarming if you do not know the context. You do know the context, and that somehow makes it worse. You try to hold it together. You focus on breathing. You remind yourself this is ridiculous. That thought detonates everything. Your lungs seize, your vision blurs slightly, and you are suddenly aware of how little control you have over your own face. You laugh because everyone else is laughing, and everyone else is laughing because you are. This is not joy exactly. It is closer to surrender. Across the room, someone finally loses the battle. They slide sideways, still laughing, until they disappear from view. There is a brief pause, then applause. Not loud, nothing crude. Polite, appreciative clapping. A job well done. Eventually, the storyteller falters completely, overcome by their own creation. The room is chaos now, genteel chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Corsets strain, handkerchiefs are abandoned. People gasp for breath like swimmers surfacing after too long underwater. Then, gradually, it ebbs. Laughter burns itself out. Bodies slump back into chairs, faces flush. There is an afterglow, a quiet disbelief that this was allowed. Someone checks on the person who collapsed, who is now sitting up, dazed but triumphant. They are congratulated softly. Tea is brought in. This is important. Tea marks the transition back to civilization. Cups are lifted with trembling hands. People smile at each other with the intimacy of survivors. For a moment, defenses are down. Everyone feels lighter, emptied out, as if something unwanted has been shaken loose. No one discusses how strange this is. That would ruin it. Instead, they comment on the quality of the laughter, the cleverness of the story, the impressive stamina on display. Compliments are exchanged like medals. Later, as you leave, your cheeks ache and your chest feels tender. You are exhausted, but in a way that feels earned. The Victorians would say this was healthy, a cleansing storm of emotion released under supervision. They would not say that it is one of the few times they allow themselves to lose control together. But you feel it anyway, and for once, no one faints alone. You are invited after dark, because spirits apparently keep office hours. The room is prepared with intention. Curtains are drawn tight. Lamps are lowered to a glow that flatters faces and excuses shadows, and the furniture has been nudged just close enough to make personal space a suggestion rather than a rule. This is not a chapel. This is a stage, and you are both audience and prop. Everyone sits in a circle, hands hovering awkwardly, waiting for permission to touch. Someone clears their throat and explains that tonight is serious, respectful, and absolutely not for entertainment. This is said with the same tone used before fireworks. You nod, because nodding is required, and because you already know this will feel less like faith and more like a well-rehearsed performance with excellent lighting. The medium arrives last. Of course they do. They wear layers that whisper when they move, and jewelry that catches the light at dramatic moments. Their voice is calm, soothing, and carefully paced. You notice how they pause just long enough to let anticipation swell. This is not accidental. This is craft. Hands are joined. The contact is immediate and intimate, a reminder that seances are also about testing social boundaries under the protection of the supernatural. You are suddenly holding hands with someone you barely know, and it is acceptable because ghosts. The medium asks everyone to clear their minds, which is ironic given the circumstances. The room grows quiet. Not natural quiet, but theatrical quiet. Every creak of the building sounds intentional. Every breath feels amplified. Someone drops something accidentally and apologizes to the spirits, just in case. This is an environment where coincidence has excellent timing. The medium begins to speak, softly at first. They describe a presence, vague enough to apply to anyone, someone from beyond, someone with unfinished business. You feel a collective lean forward. Everyone wants it to be personal. Everyone hopes it is not them. A table trembles slightly. You are not sure if it moves or if the room simply wants it to. Gasps ripple around the circle, carefully contained. No one screams. That would be rude. Instead, people widen their eyes and grip hands tighter, feeding the moment without disrupting it. Questions are asked, not direct ones. That would be uncouth. They are framed gently, inviting interpretation. Are you at peace? Do you wish to speak? Is there someone here you recognize? The medium listens intently to the silence, nodding as if receiving messages that require no translation. You realize this is interactive theater. The audience supplies the energy, the reactions, the belief. The medium guides it, shapes it. But the real work is done by everyone else, eager to feel something extraordinary in a controlled environment. A knock echoes. No one moves. The medium exhales slowly, as if bracing against an invisible wind. Someone near you swallows hard. This is the moment. The room is fully engaged now. Rational thought has politely stepped outside. The messages become more specific. A name that sounds familiar to at least 3 people. A detail that could apply to half the room. A reminder that the dead know things they should not, but conveniently forget specifics when pressed. It is impressive. It is effective. You feel a chill that might be draft or suggestion. Either way, it works. Your pulse quickens. For a moment, you are willing to believe. Not because you are convinced, but because it is easier than admitting how much effort has gone into making this convincing. The seance builds to a climax. The medium grows pale, or at least adjusts their posture to suggest strain. The table shudders again. A candle flickers dramatically. Someone lets out a small sound that could be fear or delight. The difference hardly matters. Then, just as tension peaks, it ends. Abruptly, cleanly. The medium releases everyone's hands and announces that the connection is fading. Spirits are thanked. The lights are raised slightly. Reality is reintroduced in measured doses. Tea appears, because tea always appears. The circle breaks. People speak softly at first, then with growing animation. Everyone shares what they felt, what they sensed, what they almost saw. No one mentions how perfectly timed everything was. That would spoil it. As you leave, you feel oddly satisfied. You have not communed with the dead, but you have participated in something communal, dramatic, and just unsettling enough to linger. It was not belief that drew you in. It was the pleasure of being scared together, politely, with refreshments afterward. You hand over your money willingly, which is the first clue that something has gone very wrong. The pamphlet promises instruction, insight, and moral uplift. It does not mention terror, but the illustration on the cover suggests screaming is implied. This is how fear is sold to you in Victorian society, not as indulgence, but as improvement. You are not here to be frightened. You are here to learn. The fact that your pulse is already climbing is merely a side effect. The venue looks respectable enough from the outside. Brick facade, orderly entrance, a sign that uses words like exhibition, lecture, and demonstration. Inside, the lighting drops immediately, because knowledge apparently prefers shadows. The air smells faintly of dust, oil, and anticipation. Other patrons gather near you, pretending this is an educational outing rather than a controlled panic session with pamphlets. Someone official steps forward to explain what you are about to experience. They assure you that everything has been designed to enlighten the mind and strengthen the nerves. Fear, they say, is a natural response that must be understood. The best way to understand it is to provoke it carefully. Everyone nods, relieved to have permission. You are ushered into a series of rooms, each one worse than the last in a way that feels intentional. Wax figures loom out of the darkness, frozen in expressions of agony, madness, or moral failure. Placards explain their significance. Criminals, lunatics, victims of poor choices. You read quickly, because reading gives you something to do with your eyes while your imagination fills in everything the lighting suggests. A sudden noise makes half the room flinch. This is not an accident. The Victorians are very good at engineering surprise. Someone laughs nervously, then apologizes for laughing. Fear is acceptable here, but enjoying it too openly still carries risk. In another section, you are invited to observe demonstrations. Scientific, of course. Electrical devices crackle. Mechanical contraptions whir. Someone explains how the body responds to shock, stress, and sudden stimuli. As they speak, something moves behind a curtain at exactly the wrong moment. Several people gasp in unison. The lecturer pauses, satisfied. This is education through adrenaline. The rush makes everything feel important. Your senses sharpen, your thoughts narrow. You remember every word because your body has decided this information might be useful for survival. There are darker attractions too. Simulated crime scenes, reenactments of famous disasters, carefully staged moments designed to make you imagine yourself there. The narration is calm, factual, almost soothing, which somehow makes the imagery worse. You are not being shouted at. You are being guided gently into dread. You notice how people cling to the educational framing. They repeat facts aloud, grounding themselves in dates and details. This happened here. That occurred then. Knowledge becomes a handrail. Without it, this would feel indulgent, possibly sinful. With it, it is virtuous. At one point, you are invited to sit while a demonstration unfolds in front of you. The lights dim further. The speaker lowers their voice. They describe a phenomenon involving darkness, isolation, and the human mind's tendency to invent threats when left alone. As they speak, the room responds. Shadows shift. Sounds echo. You are living the lecture. Your heart pounds. You remind yourself that you chose this, that this is safe, that you paid for it. The knowledge does not calm you as much as you hoped. When it finally ends, the lights come up gradually, like mercy. People exhale, straighten their clothes, and exchange polite remarks about how fascinating it all was. No one admits how affected they feel. That would undermine the educational premise. Outside, the daylight feels unreal. Colors are brighter, sounds are sharper. You feel oddly energized, as if you have survived something meaningful. This is the appeal. Fear wakes you up in a world determined to keep everything muted. Victorian society does not allow wild thrills. It allows controlled ones, fenced in by explanations and moral purpose. You scare yourself not because you want to, but because you are told it is good for you, and because, quietly, it is. You walk away clutching your pamphlet, heart still racing, mind buzzing with images you did not need to see, but you will remember them. That is the point. You are told to sit comfortably, which is generous language for a straight-backed chair, placed far too close to other straight-backed chairs. The room is quiet in a way that feels intentional, like silence has been polished and put on display. Someone explains the rules in a whisper, as if loud voices might startle the seriousness. You are to look, you are not to react. You are to remain still until someone else fails. This is a staring contest, but not the kind you remember from childhood. There is no countdown, no playful energy, no clear finish line. This is an adult version, formal, drawn out, and faintly oppressive. The goal is not to win. The goal is not to lose. The goal is to endure without revealing anything at all. You take your place across from another participant. Their face is neutral, already practiced, like a mask that has been worn often enough to forget what it hides. Around you, others pair off. The room settles into a hush so deep you can hear breathing patterns shift. It begins without announcement. Eye contact locks in, and suddenly you are aware of your own face in a way you rarely are. Every muscle feels suspicious. Is that a twitch? Is that a blink? You are not supposed to blink too often, but you cannot not blink. The balance is delicate, absurdly so. Time stretches. Seconds lose meaning. This is part of the challenge. Without conversation or movement, your mind fills the space. You think about nothing and everything. You wonder how long this has been going on. You wonder how long it could go on. You wonder why you agreed to this. Across from you, your opponent's expression does not change. Their eyes water slightly, but they do not move to wipe them. That would be failure. You admire their commitment even as you resent it. The room feels warmer. Or maybe that is your imagination. Sensations intensify when nothing else is allowed to happen. The scratch of fabric, the creak of a chair as someone shifts imperceptibly and is immediately judged for it. A cough from the corner breaks the tension for half a heartbeat. Everyone ignores it. Ignoring things is a skill here. You return your focus to the face in front of you, searching for cracks, a flicker of amusement, a tightening jaw, anything. Someone else loses first. A laugh escapes them, sudden and uncontrolled, as if their body rebelled. The sound lands heavily. The loser looks embarrassed but relieved. Applause does not happen. That would be too expressive. Instead, there is a subtle nod of acknowledgement. They are escorted out of the contest gently, like someone leaving a library early. The rest of you continue. Your eyes begin to ache. You realize how much effort it takes to look without reacting. Faces are strange when stared at this long. Features distort. Expressions seem to hover between emotions. You start imagining what the other person is thinking, and then you stop yourself. Thinking leads to feeling, and feeling leads to expression. This is not about dominance. It is about control. The ability to sit with discomfort and show nothing. The Victorians value this highly. It suggests strength, composure, and a refusal to be easily affected by the world. Another participant fails. A blink held too long, a mouth that twitches. The smallest betrayals are enough. They leave quietly, eyes lowered, as if exiting a religious service early. Your own resolve wavers. Your eyes burn. Your thoughts wander dangerously close to humor, which would be catastrophic. You focus on breathing slowly, in and out, in and out. You become very aware of your own existence. At some point, the contest ends not with a victory, but with exhaustion. The remaining participants are released simultaneously, no winner declared. This is intentional. Declaring a winner would introduce triumph, and triumph is an emotion best avoided. People relax visibly, though no one comments on it. Faces soften. Eyes look away. The room exhales together. Someone pours tea, because tea restores normalcy. Cups clink softly. Conversation resumes, carefully, as if everyone is testing their ability to speak again. No one discusses the contest directly. That would be vulgar. Instead, they comment on the quiet, the discipline, the interesting nature of such exercises. Compliments are implied rather than stated. You feel strangely drained, not unhappy, not satisfied, just emptied out. The experience has taken something from you and given nothing obvious back. And yet, you suspect that is the appeal. As you leave, you catch your reflection in a window. Your face looks the same, but you know better. You have just spent a significant amount of time proving you can feel nothing in front of others, and in this society, that counts as entertainment. You learn quickly that health in Victorian society is not a private matter. It is a performance, and like all good performances, it benefits from exaggeration, timing, and an appreciative audience. Feeling unwell is unfortunate. Displaying it artfully is impressive. You are not encouraged to be sick. You are encouraged to appear interestingly fragile. The fainting couch exists for a reason. It is not there for emergencies. It is there for moments. Moments when the room needs a pause, when attention must be redirected, when conversation has stalled and someone must collapse gently to restore momentum. You notice how strategically it is placed, always within reach, always upholstered in something dramatic. You begin with a cough. Nothing alarming, just enough to suggest a delicate constitution. Heads turn. Someone asks if you are quite all right. You assure them you are, of course, but you do so while pressing a hand to your chest in a way that implies bravery rather than comfort. This is important. Illness here is not weakness. It is an accessory. Others take it further. A sudden bout of dizziness, announced softly but insistently. A sigh followed by a pause long enough to invite concern. Someone dabs their forehead and murmurs about the heat. Even though the room is objectively cold, these are not accidents. These are cues. You watch a master at work. A woman rises to speak, sways almost imperceptibly, then sinks back into her chair with practiced grace. Gasps ripple. Chairs scrape. Someone fetches smelling salts with the speed of a stagehand hitting their mark. She revives moments later, apologetic, radiant, the center of attention without having said a word. The beauty of the fake illness is that it cannot be challenged without cruelty. To doubt someone's discomfort is socially unacceptable. To question the sincerity of a swoon would make you the villain. This gives the performer complete control. They may escalate or recover at will. Men participate too, though differently. A persistent cough that interrupts conversation at key moments. A sudden need to sit down. A comment about nerves or exhaustion delivered with a rueful smile. This signals sensitivity without threatening masculinity. It is a careful balance, but the skilled manage it. You begin to see how these performances shape social dynamics. A well-timed feint can end an awkward topic. A prolonged ailment can delay obligations. A dramatic recovery can inspire admiration. Illness becomes a language, spoken fluently by those who understand its power. Doctors are complicit, whether knowingly or not. Diagnoses are vague, treatments theatrical, tonics, rest cures, and instructions to avoid excitement. Avoiding excitement becomes an excellent excuse for refusing anything inconvenient. You are not antisocial. You are delicate. There is a strange intimacy in shared suffering. People bond over symptoms, compare remedies, and trade stories of near collapse. These conversations are animated, detailed, and oddly cheerful. Misery, when stylized, becomes a social glue. You try it yourself one evening. The timing is right. The room is crowded. Attention has drifted. You feel a slight warmth in your face, which may be real or may be imagination, and you lean into it. Your breath shortens. Your vision narrows just enough to be noticeable. Someone reaches out instinctively. You allow yourself to be guided to a chair. You apologize softly. You insist it is nothing. This is the correct response. Concern intensifies. Someone offers water. Someone else suggests fresh air. You decline both because acceptance would shorten the scene. When you recover, you do so gradually. You thank everyone. You smile faintly. You are praised for your fortitude. No one mentions that you were perfectly fine 5 minutes ago. The moment has passed, and with it, any need for explanation. What makes this entertainment is not the deception, it is the agreement. Everyone knows, on some level, that these ailments are curated. Everyone also knows it would be rude to say so. The performance exists in the space between belief and politeness. Of course, sometimes people are genuinely unwell. This complicates things. Real illness disrupts the rhythm. It lacks control. It overstays its welcome. That is why it is treated differently, with seriousness rather than charm. The fake illness is tidy. It arrives on cue and leaves gracefully. It adds texture to social life without demanding too much. It is vulnerability with boundaries. As the evening ends, You reflect on how easily discomfort becomes currency. In a society where strong emotion is discouraged, physical weakness provides a sanctioned outlet. You may not cry openly, you may not rage, but you may faint, and when you do, you are admired, attended to, and gently returned to your place. It is exhausting, this constant performance of fragility, but it is also, undeniably, effective. You join the line without quite admitting why. The posters promise education, anthropology, science, words carefully chosen to reassure you that what you are about to do is respectable. You are not gawking. You are observing. You are expanding your understanding of the human condition. The fact that the illustrations are lurid and the crowd is buzzing with anticipation is purely incidental. Inside, the space smells of sawdust, perfume, and the faint anxiety of too many people trying to look composed. Everyone stands a little straighter here. This is a place where manners matter, because staring is only acceptable if done politely. You are expected to look, but not react. Curiosity is encouraged. Emotion is not. The exhibits are introduced one by one, each accompanied by a placard filled with impressive language, scientific terms, geographic origins, measurements carefully listed to imply objectivity. The person on display stands beneath it all, very still, very practiced. They have learned how to be looked at without flinching. You feel the tension immediately. Your eyes want to roam. Your face wants to respond. You suppress both. This is the art of the freak show. It is not about shock. It is about controlled discomfort, yours and theirs, layered beneath politeness like lace over something sharp. The crowd murmurs in low tones. People comment on proportions, on rarity, on how extraordinary it all is. No one says what they are really thinking. Instead, they ask questions that sound intellectual. How fascinating, how unusual, how remarkable the diversity of nature is. You nod along, relieved to have approved phrases ready. Some performers lean into it. They smile, bow, play their roles with theatrical flair. Others remain impassive, conserving energy, meeting the audience's gaze just long enough to remind you that this exchange goes both ways. You are not invisible here. You are part of the display too. Children are present, brought along as if this were a museum. They are instructed to behave, to be respectful, to learn. Their questions are shushed not because they are cruel, but because they are honest. Honesty is dangerous in a place built on pretense. You notice how long people linger, how they circle back for another look, how difficult it is to stop staring once you have started. The mind searches for context, for explanation, for reassurance that this is acceptable. The signs help. The lighting helps. The presence of others helps most of all. Shared curiosity feels less like cruelty. There is applause at the end of some displays. Polite, measured, the kind reserved for demonstrations rather than delight. The performers acknowledge it with nods or gestures, professional to the last. This is their livelihood. They know how to deliver fascination without demanding empathy. You feel conflicted, though no one asks you to articulate it. That would spoil the experience. Instead, you focus on the educational framing. You remind yourself that you have learned something about bodies, about variation, about how wide the definition of normal can be when presented carefully. And yet, as you move from exhibit to exhibit, a pattern emerges. The fascination is not really about difference, it is about reassurance. Standing here, you are reminded of what you are not. You leave feeling ordinary, which in Victorian society is a quiet relief. The freak show provides boundaries. It draws a line between observer and observed, between acceptable and exceptional, between the audience and the stage. Those boundaries are comforting. They keep chaos contained. There is an unspoken rule that you do not linger too long on any one person. That would feel invasive. So you rotate, take measured glances, move on. The rhythm keeps guilt at bay. When you exit, you hear people discussing the exhibits in the same tone they might use for paintings or artifacts. Tasteful, distant. The experience is declared enlightening, worthwhile. No one mentions how uneasy they feel. Outside, the daylight feels sharper. You catch your reflection briefly and straighten your posture. Normalcy reasserts itself. You are back among the unremarkable, and that feels like safety. The freak show remains behind you. Lights dimmed, performers resetting, curiosity waiting for the next crowd. You do not question it too deeply. After all, you were not staring. You were learning. You arrive dressed as though attending a lecture, because that is the lie everyone agrees to tell themselves. The invitation promised enlightenment, scholarship, a glimpse into antiquity. It did not mention the smell, or the fact that this is, functionally, a party where the guest of honor has been dead for several thousand years and did not consent to any of this. The room is crowded and warm, heavy with perfume and anticipation. There is a table at the center, draped in linen, positioned so everyone gets a good view. Wine glasses clink softly. Someone laughs too loudly, then stops, remembering where they are. Respectability is maintained through tone rather than behavior. The mummy lies still, which is the bare minimum expected of it. Layers of ancient wrapping hold centuries of sand, ritual, and quiet firmly in place. The host clears their throat and begins explaining Egypt. Dynasties are mentioned. Gods are referenced. Everyone nods, relieved to have context, because context makes this feel less like grave interference and more like culture. You lean forward with the others as the first layer is removed. The sound is dry, almost brittle, like opening a book that has waited too long. Dust rises into the lamplight. Someone coughs and apologizes, embarrassed to interrupt history. Another guest remarks on how remarkably well-preserved everything is, as if commenting on a roast. Each layer peeled back earns murmurs of appreciation. The wrappings are examined, passed around, held delicately between fingers that moments ago were buttering bread. There is talk of hieroglyphs, of craftsmanship, of how extraordinary it is that this body has traveled so far only to end up here, beneath a chandelier. You are offered a closer look. You hesitate just long enough to seem thoughtful, then accept. The fabric is surprisingly light. You imagine the hands that wrapped it, the ceremony, the intention. This thought lasts approximately 2 seconds before someone asks if you can see the stitching clearly. The academic tone persists bravely. Measurements are suggested, observations are shared, speculation blooms. How old was this person? What did they eat? Did they expect this? No one asks the last question aloud, because that would spoil the mood. There is excitement when jewelry appears. A collective intake of breath. Gold glints. Applause almost happens, then thinks better of it. Instead, people smile with satisfaction, like successful archaeologists who did not have to leave the city. The body beneath is revealed slowly, strategically. Not all at once. That would be gauche. The face draws the longest pause. Lamps are adjusted. Someone comments on the expression, on how peaceful it looks. Another insists it looks stern. A debate begins, because this is now a social object, open to interpretation. You notice how comfortable everyone becomes. The initial reverence fades into curiosity, then into something like entertainment. Plates are refreshed. Notes are taken. Someone sketches. The ancient dead have become a centerpiece, a conversation starter, a reason to gather on a weeknight. There is a faint unease beneath it all, like a draft you cannot quite locate. You feel it when the laughter lingers a second too long, when someone suggests preserving a fragment as a keepsake, when the host jokes about how these events are all the rage lately. You wonder what future generations will do with you if given enough wine and permission. Still, you stay. You listen. You nod. You participate, because leaving would draw attention, and attention is dangerous. It might imply judgment. It might suggest you are uncomfortable with history being handled so casually. The unwrapping concludes with polite satisfaction. The mummy, now partially exposed, is declared fascinating, educational, worth the effort, Plans are made to attend another event like this soon. Someone recommends a supplier. As coats are retrieved and goodbyes exchanged, the body remains behind, quieter than ever. Relieved perhaps that the performance is over, you step back into the night, carrying the strange certainty that you have learned something important, not about ancient civilizations, about how easily curiosity turns into spectacle when dressed well enough. You stand in a hall that smells like vinegar, boiled meat, and moral superiority. The tables are long, the benches hard, and the audience unusually quiet for something that claims to be wholesome entertainment. This is not a feast. It is a test. The participants sit stiffly, hands folded, faces composed, as if about to be examined rather than fed. The food arrives without flourish. Dishes are set down with the seriousness of legal documents. Bowls of jellied eels, plates stacked with cold kidneys, dense puddings that glisten ominously, pies whose contents are never fully explained. No one compliments the presentation. That would imply enjoyment. And enjoyment is not the point. You are told, repeatedly, that this is about endurance, about fortitude, about proving mastery over appetite rather than surrendering to it. Pleasure would cheapen the exercise. Pleasure would suggest weakness. The goal is not to like what you consume, but to outlast it. The first competitor begins with deliberate movements, chewing carefully, swallowing with visible effort. The room watches intently. Each bite is a small drama. Will they pause? Will they falter? Will their expression betray something dangerously close to satisfaction? You learn quickly that reacting is discouraged. No cheering, no laughter. Applause is reserved for completion, not enthusiasm. The crowd murmurs approval only when someone finishes a particularly grim portion without complaint. Another competitor follows, tackling a dish that smells aggressively of fish and preservation. They breathe through their nose with concentration, eyes fixed on nothing. Someone near you whispers about the nutritional value, as if that helps. Someone else mentions how character is built in moments like this. Time stretches. Plates empty slowly. Faces grow pale. The food does not get better. It gets heavier, denser, more symbolic. Each course feels like a statement about discipline and the dangers of indulgence. You notice how often the word wholesome is used. Wholesome challenge, wholesome competition, wholesome discomfort. It becomes clear that this is not really about eating. It is about control, about proving that you can put things into your body without letting your body have an opinion. One participant hesitates, fork hovering. The room stiffens. A pause like that is risky. It suggests thought, and thought might lead to refusal. Eventually they continue. Slower now. Determination etched across their face. A few heads nod. Respect is restored. There are rules. No seasoning beyond what is provided. No water until the end. No commentary during consumption. Complaining is grounds for disqualification, as is smiling too much. You wonder how often that rule has been enforced. The audience prides itself on neutrality, but you can feel allegiances forming. People lean forward when a competitor struggles. They sit back when someone powers through a particularly unpleasant texture. This is suspense built on starch and social pressure. At one table, a man finishes his portion and sits very still, hands flat, breathing carefully. Someone checks the plate, then announces the result. Approval ripples through the room, controlled but sincere. The man nods once, as if accepting a medal he cannot see. There is no celebration. No second helping. Success here is quiet. It is marked by survival rather than satisfaction. You overhear conversations about previous events. The time someone managed fermented cabbage without flinching. The year the suet pudding defeated half the field. These stories are told with pride, like tales of exploration or war. When the final competitor finishes, the event concludes with polite acknowledgement. The tables are cleared quickly. The smell lingers. People stand, stretch, adjust their coats. Someone remarks that it was very instructive. Outside, fresh air feels excessive. You realize how tense your shoulders have been, how tightly everyone held themselves to avoid reacting. The restraint was contagious. You understand now that this form of entertainment is a mirror. It reflects a society terrified of excess, suspicious of pleasure, and deeply committed to turning even food into a moral trial. No one leaves hungry. No one leaves happy. And that, you are told, is the point. You discover quickly that science, when removed from institutions and placed on a dining table, becomes a form of entertainment with plausible deniability. You are not being reckless. You are learning. The difference matters, especially when explaining scorch marks to relatives. The Victorian home is full of potential. Shelves groan with books promising enlightenment. Cabinets hide bottles labeled with elegant handwriting and vague warnings. Curiosity thrives in this environment, fed by the belief that progress favors the bold and occasionally singed. If something explodes, it is merely enthusiasm expressing itself. You begin modestly. A few chemicals ordered by post, a magnifying glass, a notebook meant to give the whole endeavor a scholarly appearance. You read instructions written with alarming confidence and follow them with even greater optimism. Precision is encouraged, but improvisation is inevitable. After all, you are not a professional. That is part of the charm. Experiments are social affairs. Friends gather to watch, offering suggestions they cannot possibly back up. Someone reads aloud from a manual while you stir something that is not supposed to smoke. When it does, there is excitement rather than concern. Smoke means reaction. Reaction means success. The line between discovery and disaster is thin, and you hover over it with remarkable calm. A fizzing sound draws applause. A sudden color change inspires notes. A smell that makes eyes water is described as promising. You wave it away because discomfort feels like proof that something important is happening. Electricity becomes particularly fashionable. You string wires across furniture, convinced that understanding current will make you a better person. Small shocks are endured bravely. Larger ones are laughed off with dignity. Someone suggests you might be overdoing it. You remind them that innovation requires courage and that the great minds of the age surely experienced worse. Biology follows. You peer at slides, poke at specimens, and speculate loudly. Living things are fascinating, especially when observed without training. You make pronouncements based on very little evidence. Your confidence grows with each unverified conclusion. Chemistry is where things escalate. Reactions become louder. Flames appear unexpectedly. You learn which fabrics burn fastest through unfortunate trial. The room fills with smells that linger for days, clinging to curtains and reputations. Still, you persist, because stopping would imply doubt. You notice how danger sharpens attention. Everyone watches closely when something might go wrong. Silence falls when you heat a mixture beyond recommended levels. When nothing catastrophic happens, relief turns into pride. You have stared into chaos and emerged intact. There are rules, loosely observed. Windows should be open. Water should be nearby. Someone should be ready to intervene, though no one is quite sure how. These precautions exist mostly to reassure rather than prevent. Failures are reframed as learning experiences. A cracked beaker is unfortunate but instructive. A minor burn becomes a story. A loud bang is retold with increasing enthusiasm. You collect these moments like credentials. The appeal lies not just in the science, but in the autonomy. Here, you decide what is worth testing. You are free from oversight, free from peer review, free from anyone telling you that perhaps this is not a good idea. Freedom hums in the air, occasionally accompanied by smoke. You begin to suspect that the experiments are secondary. What really matters is the performance of intellect, the posture of inquiry, the thrill of standing at the edge of understanding with nothing but curiosity and a questionable setup. There is admiration in the room, mixed with concern. People speak of you as daring, inquisitive, slightly unhinged in a respectable way. This is flattering. It reinforces the idea that you are participating in progress rather than courting disaster. Eventually, something goes undeniably wrong. Not tragic, but undeniable. A reaction leaps beyond control. A flame refuses to behave. There is a scramble, a shout, a moment where consequences feel very close. It resolves, barely. The room exhales. For a beat, no one speaks. Then someone laughs, a little too loudly, and the tension breaks. You make notes. You discuss variables. You promise adjustments next time, because there will be a next time. Danger, you have learned, feels purposeful when wrapped in curiosity. And curiosity, in this era, is the most entertaining excuse imaginable. You decide that learning is far too important to be left to professionals. Knowledge, after all, should live in the home, preferably on a sturdy table near a window that opens, at least in theory. The Victorian era has taught you that curiosity is a virtue, and when combined with confidence, it becomes indistinguishable from competence. This is how the experiment begins. Your parlor transforms into a laboratory through sheer intention. Books are stacked for authority. Glassware is arranged with ceremonial care. Bottles with elegant labels promise insight. Though the warnings are written so politely they barely register, you assure yourself that danger only exists when people lack purpose, and you are very purposeful. Friends gather, because discovery is better with witnesses. Someone brings a notebook. Someone else brings opinions. No one brings training. The room hums with expectation as you consult instructions written by someone who assumes a baseline of understanding you do not possess. You nod anyway. Nodding feels scientific. The first reaction is subtle. A liquid changes color. There is a collective lean forward. This is thrilling. You have altered reality, or at least a small portion of it. You write this down, even though you are not sure why it happened. Writing makes it official. Encouraged, you proceed. Heat is applied. This feels advanced. Flames are inherently impressive, especially when they appear unexpectedly. A hiss emerges from the apparatus, which you interpret as enthusiasm. Someone suggests stepping back. You wave them off, because stepping back would imply doubt. Smell enters the equation next. Sharp, acrid, unmistakable. Windows are opened with ceremony. Handkerchiefs appear. You describe the odor as interesting, which is the word people use when they do not want to admit concern. The reaction continues, apparently committed to proving a point. Electricity follows, because it is modern and invisible, and therefore irresistible. Wires snake across furniture. A device hums. You feel a small shock and laugh, because laughing establishes dominance. The audience laughs too, relieved that you did. Pain, when acknowledged lightly, becomes entertainment. You notice how quickly caution dissolves once something works. Success breeds escalation. You add more of an ingredient than recommended, convinced that greater quantities yield greater insight. The mixture responds enthusiastically, too enthusiastically. There is a moment when the room goes quiet, not out of reverence, but calculation. Everyone is assessing exits. The apparatus rattles. You consider intervening, then decide to observe a little longer. Observation is the heart of science. When something spills, it is described as an adjustment. When something cracks, it is described as feedback. When something ignites briefly and then stops, it is described as promising. Language works hard to protect the illusion that this is all intentional. Biology experiments introduce a different kind of unease. You peer at specimens with confidence borrowed from illustrations. You poke, prod, and speculate. Conclusions are drawn rapidly and shared generously. No one challenges you, because no one knows enough to do so. As the evening progresses, the experiments blur together. Notes become less precise. Confidence remains unwavering. You are riding the momentum of inquiry, and momentum does not slow easily. Then comes the moment everyone will remember. A reaction behaves in a way that cannot be reframed. Heat surges. Sound follows. There is a flash that feels personal. Chairs scrape back. Someone yelps. You act quickly, though not expertly, and the situation resolves itself through a combination of luck and panic. Silence settles. thick and immediate. Smoke drifts upward, carrying the scent of ambition gone slightly astray. You stand very still, aware of your heartbeat and the fact that this could have been much worse. For a brief instant, the room holds its breath. Then you speak, calmly, explaining what you think happened. The explanation is speculative but confident. This reassures everyone. Confidence is contagious. Laughter returns, shaky but sincere. The incident is reframed as exhilarating. You promise refinements, adjustments. Next time, it will be even better. As people leave, they compliment your bravery, your intellect, your willingness to explore. You accept this praise graciously, already planning the next experiment. Later, alone with the quiet aftermath, you tidy up evidence of chaos and feel a familiar satisfaction. You have learned something, though you are not entirely sure what. Danger, you conclude, is simply curiosity asking for attention. And attention, in this age, is the highest form of progress. You curate your collection with the same care others reserve for fine china or landscape paintings. Each piece has a story which you are always ready to tell, even when no one asks, especially when no one asks. In Victorian society, owning unsettling objects is not a warning sign. It is a hobby, provided everything is arranged tastefully. The first thing guests notice is the hair jewelry. It sits in a velvet-lined case, braided locks arranged into brooches and rings with floral precision. You explain that it is sentimental, deeply romantic, a way to keep loved ones close. You do not immediately clarify that some of these loved ones were never actually known to you. That detail can wait. Hair, you insist, is durable, eternal, almost. It survives long after the rest has politely exited. This is said with a smile meant to reassure, though it rarely succeeds. Guests nod, murmuring appreciation while subtly checking whether their own hair feels secure. Nearby, death masks line the shelf, plaster faces frozen in their final expressions, somewhere between peaceful and mildly inconvenienced. You have positioned them carefully so they catch the light just right. This softens their features and makes them easier to discuss over tea. You point out the craftsmanship, the historical importance, the intimacy of capturing a person at the exact moment they stop being involved in anything. Someone asks whose they are. You answer eagerly. Poets, thinkers, a distant relative who never returned a borrowed book. Each name is delivered with pride. You can see the calculation behind your guests' eyes as they decide how long they are expected to look before politeness allows them to glance away. The room contains smaller curios as well. Mourning rings with tiny compartments. Lockets holding miniature portraits of the deceased, painted with unsettling cheer. Fragments of coffin wood, labeled neatly. You have resisted the urge to arrange them chronologically, though the temptation remains. You explain that this is not morbid, this is remembrance. In an age where death is ever present, ignoring it would be rude. Better to acknowledge it openly, to integrate it into daily life. You gesture around the room as proof. Death, here, is tasteful, coordinated, framed. Guests shift their weight as you speak. Chairs creak. Someone clears their throat. They compliment your dedication, which is the safest word they can find. You accept graciously. The hair wreath above the mantel is your favorite. An intricate circle of interwoven strands, crafted into leaves and petals. It took months to assemble, and longer to source. You recount the process with enthusiasm, explaining techniques and traditions. Victorian mourning, you say, is an art form. Grief must be expressed, but elegantly. You notice how eyes linger on the wreath, then slide away. It is doing its job. There is a social thrill in owning objects that make others uncomfortable. It establishes you as someone with depth, someone unafraid of the darker textures of existence. You are not frivolous, you are contemplative. The fact that people avoid sitting too close to certain shelves is merely a side effect. You offer to show a particularly rare piece, a relic connected to a famous death. The room grows very quiet. You pause for effect, then reveal it carefully. Reactions vary. Fascination wrestles with alarm. You interpret this as success. What you do not say, but understand fully, is that these objects grant a kind of control. Death, displayed and catalogued, becomes manageable. It sits where you place it. It waits patiently to be admired. It does not intrude unexpectedly when you have company. As the evening winds down, guests thank you with visible relief. Compliments are repeated. Invitations are declined politely. Coats are retrieved with unusual speed. You wave goodbye, satisfied. Once alone, you straighten a display that has been disturbed. You polish glass. You realign a mask so it faces forward again. The room settles into its familiar stillness, surrounded by fragments of lives that ended elsewhere. You look around and feel a quiet pride. Others collect beauty that fades. You collect reminders that nothing does, and you arrange them beautifully. You step inside a drawing room that has been aggressively repurposed. Furniture has been pushed to the edges with ceremonial care. Rugs are rolled back like they are about to witness something important. Chairs line the walls, not for resting, but for judging. This is not a room for comfort tonight. This is an arena. The game has already begun. Though no one is moving, everyone is holding something. A hoop, a stick, a set of wooden discs. The objects look harmless, which is how you know they are not. Someone clears their throat and begins reciting the rules from memory. There are many rules. They reference angles, turns, penalties, and a scoring system that requires arithmetic and moral interpretation. You nod along even though you understand very little. Understanding is not required to participate. Commitment is. Victorian indoor sports exist because the body must be occupied without becoming suspiciously healthy. Too much exertion implies manual labor. Too much sweating suggests enthusiasm. These games are carefully designed to avoid both while still feeling competitive enough to justify their existence. The first round begins. You are instructed to flick a small object across the floor using a tool that looks like it was designed to stir soup. The goal is to land it precisely near another object without touching a third object that represents something symbolic. No one can quite remember what. Possibly honor. You crouch slightly, which earns approving nods. Posture matters. Someone else attempts their move and fails dramatically, sending the piece skittering into a forbidden zone. Gasps ripple through the room. This is serious. A penalty is announced. No one smiles. Points are awarded conservatively. A single point feels like a promotion. Applause is restrained but sincere. You begin to sense that winning is less important than demonstrating that you are trying very hard to win. Between rounds, there is discussion. Strategies are debated. Someone references a pamphlet. Another recalls a controversial match from years ago that ended poorly due to a disputed ruling involving proximity and intent. The tension is real, even if the stakes are imaginary. You take your turn again, adjusting your grip carefully. The room watches. You execute the move with moderate success. Not exceptional, but respectable. Compliments are offered in a tone usually reserved for endurance rather than skill. There is no physical benefit to any of this. Your heart rate remains steady. Your muscles are not challenged. The only thing exercised is patience. This is by design. The satisfaction comes from mastery of constraint, not exertion. Another game follows immediately because momentum must be maintained. This one involves tossing small objects into compartments while reciting rules aloud to ensure compliance. Someone is disqualified for speaking out of turn. They accept this with grace and visible disappointment. You notice how invested everyone becomes. Faces grow intent. Small failures sting. Small successes glow. The lack of physical demand allows emotional intensity to flourish unchecked. Spectators whisper critiques. Participants defend their interpretations of the rules. A minor disagreement nearly escalates into something personal before being smoothed over by referencing precedent. Precedent is powerful here. Time stretches. Hours pass unnoticed. Refreshments are offered but largely ignored. because stopping would break the spell. This is not play. This is purpose. You realize that these games serve a vital function. They create structure where there is none. They impose order on idle hours. They allow competition without chaos, effort without exhaustion, victory without visible strain. When the final round concludes, there is a collective exhale. Scores are tallied carefully. The winner is announced with modest ceremony. The prize is symbolic. The real reward is having endured the process. Furniture is returned to its rightful place. Rugs are unrolled. The room pretends nothing happened. People discuss the evening with solemn satisfaction. It was stimulating. It was demanding. It was absolutely unnecessary. You leave feeling oddly fulfilled, not because you moved your body, but because you obeyed rules that did not need to exist. In a world terrified of wasted time, you have found a way to waste it correctly. You begin the day by preparing for battle, though everyone insists on calling it dressing. The garments wait patiently, layered and structured, each one designed to reshape you into something more acceptable. You do not ask acceptable to whom. You already know the answer. The corset comes first, because it must. It is laid out like a challenge, laces slack now, but full of future intentions. You step into it carefully, breathing deep before the tightening begins. Someone assists, pulling slowly, methodically, as if calibrating an instrument rather than constricting a human torso. You hold onto a chair and focus on maintaining composure. Flinching would suggest weakness. Weakness is unfashionable. With each pull, your posture improves whether you like it or not. Shoulders back, spine straight. Breathing becomes a suggestion rather than a guarantee. You are reminded that beauty requires sacrifice, and sacrifice, conveniently, can be witnessed. The mirror confirms progress. You look refined, slightly haunted, but refined. Layers follow. Undergarments, petticoats, skirts, bodices, each one adding weight and heat. Fabric stacks upon fabric until you feel upholstered. Movement becomes deliberate. Sitting requires planning. Standing requires commitment. You are aware of every inch of yourself in a way that feels oddly virtuous. The room grows warmer, or perhaps that is just you. Air circulates poorly around so much effort. Still, you smile. Smiling suggests ease, and ease is aspirational even when inaccurate. Someone compliments your silhouette. This validates everything. Shoes arrive last, narrow and unforgiving. Your feet are encouraged into shapes they did not previously consider. You take careful steps, relearning balance. Pain is acknowledged quietly, then ignored. This is not discomfort. This is dedication. Once fully assembled, you are ready to be seen. Being seen is the point. Fashion in this era is not about comfort or even individuality. It is about proof. Proof that you belong. Proof that you are willing to endure for the sake of appearance. Outdoors, the heat intensifies. Sunlight presses down, absorbed by layers designed more for status than climate. You move slowly, because speed would disrupt the lines. Others around you move with similar restraint, a collective choreography of endurance. Sweat is concealed. Strain is hidden behind practiced expressions. Conversation circles around fabric choices. Tailoring, the latest trends. Complaints are framed as admiration. How heavy this season is. How structured. How demanding. Everyone agrees it is worth it. You observe how fashion becomes a shared trial. Bonding happens through mutual suffering. Compliments are exchanged like medals. Someone mentions fainting at a recent event, and this is received with envy rather than concern. Corsets are discussed openly, competitively. Who laces tighter? Who lasts longer? Who maintains grace despite clear physical limits? The body becomes a site of achievement, measured in inches and hours endured. There is a strange comfort in the uniformity. Everyone is constrained together. Individual discomfort dissolves into collective effort. You are not alone in this. That makes it noble. As the day wears on, your movements grow more economical. You learn how to turn without twisting, how to sit without collapsing, how to laugh without breathing too deeply. These are skills honed through necessity. By evening, the strain settles deep. Muscles ache, skin protests. Still, you remain upright. Removing the garments too soon would cheapen the experience. You must be seen like this for it to count. When the moment finally comes to undress, it is slow and reverent. Laces loosen, layers peel away. Air rushes back in, shocking in its freedom. You feel lighter, almost unreal. Marks remain, temporary evidence of commitment. You touch them thoughtfully. They will fade, but the memory will not. Tomorrow, you will do it again. Because in this world, fashion is not worn. It is survived. You arrive knowing full well that someone is going to suffer and that someone might be you. The invitation was vague in the way that signals danger. An evening gathering, light entertainment, a chance to observe character. In Victorian language, this translates to public embarrassment with refreshments. The room is arranged to encourage exposure. Chairs face inward. A small platform occupies the center, just elevated enough to make standing there feel significant. People take their seats quickly, choosing positions that allow a clear view while maintaining plausible distance from responsibility. No one wants to be too close to the action. That would imply involvement. The host opens with genial remarks about humility, improvement, and the value of laughter shared among friends. Everyone nods. Laughter, after all, is healthiest when someone else provides it. The rules are explained gently, which somehow makes them worse. Participants will be called upon to read, perform, confess, or demonstrate. Errors will be noted. Reactions will be observed. The first victim is invited forward with applause that sounds encouraging but feels like pressure. They smile tightly and comply. Perhaps they are asked to recite something difficult. Perhaps they are handed an object they clearly do not know how to use. The specifics hardly matter. The point is imbalance. Knowledge versus expectation, confidence versus reality. They begin. A mistake happens quickly. It always does. A pause, a stumble. The audience responds with restrained amusement. No one laughs openly. That would be rude. Instead, there are murmurs, exchanged glances, carefully timed coughs. The humiliation blooms slowly, like heat spreading under fabric. The participant pushes through, cheeks flushing, voice thinning. They finish to polite applause and return to their seat visibly altered. A lesson has been delivered. You tell yourself this is harmless. Character building. A reminder not to take oneself too seriously. These phrases float easily through your mind while your stomach tightens. Another name is called. Another performance begins. Sometimes the embarrassment is intellectual, a wrong answer, a mispronunciation. Sometimes it is physical, an awkward movement, a failed demonstration. The audience remains composed, but the energy is unmistakable. This is entertainment carefully disguised as instruction. You begin to notice patterns. Those who recover quickly are admired. Those who falter linger in memory. A particularly awkward moment becomes a story that will circulate long after the evening ends. Social consequences extend well beyond the room. There is a curious intimacy to shared embarrassment. The audience participates by witnessing. Their restraint is part of the ritual. Too much laughter would break the spell. The goal is not cruelty, but discomfort, finely tuned and socially sanctioned. Your name is called eventually. It always is. You stand with what you hope is dignity and make your way to the center. The room feels warmer here, brighter. You are handed instructions that seem simple until you attempt to follow them. Your mind blanks in exactly the way you feared it would. You begin, aware of every breath, every blink. The smallest misstep feels enormous. You sense the audience leaning in without moving. Someone tilts their head, curious. Another presses their lips together to suppress a smile. This is the worst part. Not the laughter, but the restraint. A mistake escapes you. There is no undoing it. You continue anyway, because stopping would be worse. The moment stretches, elastic and merciless. You finish at last and retreat, applause washing over you like a polite dismissal. Back in your seat, you feel exposed, seen, slightly reduced. No one mentions what happened. That is the rule. Silence seals the experience. As the evening winds down, people discuss how enlightening it all was, how amusing, how valuable these exercises can be. Compliments are exchanged, reputations subtly adjusted. You leave with a strange clarity. Embarrassment here is not accidental. It is cultivated, curated, shared. It reinforces boundaries. It reminds everyone where they stand. And tomorrow, when the story is retold, it will be softened. But you will remember exactly how it felt. You find yourself standing at the edge of a field that has been temporarily rebranded as entertainment. There are ropes to mark boundaries, benches for spectators, and a general air of excitement that suggests something important is about to happen. The important thing, you learn, is that animals are about to be encouraged to do something unnatural for the sake of communal joy. The creatures themselves seem unaware of their role in this social experiment. They mill about, sniffing the ground, blinking in the sunlight, entirely uninterested in the expectations now projected onto them. This is interpreted not as reluctance, but as charm. Wholesome fun, you are told, often begins with confusion. Someone explains the rules with enthusiasm. The animals will race from one point to another. The method of encouragement varies. Clapping, whistling, waving objects that suggest authority but provide no actual instruction. The crowd listens intently, as if this explanation transforms chaos into sport. You take a seat among families and couples, everyone pretending this is quaint rather than mildly unsettling. Children lean forward, delighted. Adults smile with practiced approval. No one asks whether the animals understand what is happening. Understanding is not a requirement for participation. The race begins abruptly. A signal is given, and the animals respond in wildly different ways. One bolts forward with unexpected speed. Another freezes, startled by the noise. A third wanders off at an angle that was clearly not part of the plan. The crowd reacts with laughter, carefully calibrated to sound affectionate. Commentary flows freely. Observations about temperament, speculation about motivation. Someone assigns personalities on the spot. The reluctant one is stubborn. The fast one is spirited. The confused one is comedic relief. Labels help manage the discomfort. You notice how invested people become. They cheer for their chosen creature, urging it on with language that suggests shared purpose. Come on, you can do it. Almost there. The animal continues doing whatever it was going to do regardless. There are prizes involved, ribbons, small trophies, occasionally food. The reward system seems arbitrary, but it adds legitimacy. Competition feels more acceptable when there is something to win, even if the winner does not care. Between races, animals are reset. Handlers coax them back into position, using patience and treats. The animals comply inconsistently. This unpredictability is framed as entertainment rather than protest. Unruliness becomes a feature. You watch a race that goes particularly poorly. One animal refuses to move at all, planting itself firmly. The crowd waits, amused. Someone tries a different tactic. The animal yawns. Laughter ripples. Eventually, the race is declared finished anyway. A winner is chosen out of obligation. No one seems bothered by the lack of fairness. Fairness is a human concern. The point is the spectacle, the shared moment of watching something living be mildly inconvenienced for fun. There are other events too. Pulling contests, balance challenges, games that require animals to interact with props they have never seen before. Each is introduced with cheerful justification, tradition, community, harmless amusement. You begin to understand that the appeal lies in control without cruelty, at least in theory. The animals are not meant to be harmed. They are meant to be guided, encouraged, and gently coerced. This distinction is important. It allows everyone to enjoy the event without guilt. Still, there are moments when an animal resists strongly enough to make the crowd uneasy. A sharp sound, a sudden movement. A handler intervenes quickly, smiling broadly, restoring the illusion. The moment passes. Applause covers it. As the day goes on, you feel the strange blend of delight and tension settle in. The animals grow tired. The crowd remains energized. Refreshments circulate. Stories are told about past events, legendary races, memorable mishaps. Nostalgia smooths over details. When it finally ends, the animals are led away, relieved to return to their own concerns. The crowd disperses, satisfied. It was charming. It was funny. It was good for the children. You walk away thinking about how easily amusement is built on borrowed agency, how quickly tradition becomes justification, how laughter can soften almost anything if shared widely enough. Behind you, the field returns to being just a field. The animals do not look back. You stand in the street, longer than necessary, pretending to admire the architecture while your attention drifts elsewhere. The windows are wide, the curtains deliberately parted, and the rooms beyond glow with the warm promise of other people's lives. This is not spying, you tell yourself. This is observation. Observation is educational. Victorian society loves observation. It dresses it up as curiosity, as study, as appreciation for domestic order. The fact that it feels thrilling is merely a coincidence no one examines too closely. You move slowly, matching your pace to the rhythm of the street. Other pedestrians do the same. All of you united in the careful art of not looking like you are looking. The trick is to glance just long enough to register a scene, then look away thoughtfully, as if filing it for later reflection. Inside one window, a family eats dinner. The arrangement is neat, almost theatrical. A father reads something aloud. A child fidgets. A mother corrects posture with a look alone. You absorb these details greedily. They are familiar, but not yours, which makes them safe to enjoy. Another window reveals a solitary figure pacing, hands clasped behind their back, rehearsing something silently. A speech, an argument, a thought that refuses to settle. You feel a flicker of recognition and quickly look away, embarrassed by the intimacy of witnessing a moment not meant for you. Some homes lean into it. Lamps placed just so. Curtains framing the room like a proscenium. These people understand the unspoken agreement. If you live visibly enough, you control what is seen. Performance becomes protection. Others seem oblivious. They move freely, unconcerned with the audience they have accidentally acquired. These are the scenes that hold you longest. The unguarded gestures, the absent-minded habits, the way someone scratches their head while thinking, or stares into space while holding a cup they forgot to drink from. You tell yourself this is harmless. No one is being disturbed. No lines are crossed. You are simply appreciating the variety of human existence from a polite distance. The thrill comes from proximity without participation. You are close enough to feel something, far enough to remain unchanged. There are organized versions of this too. Exhibitions where daily life is staged deliberately. Rooms set up to resemble ordinary homes, staffed by people hired to perform normalcy on schedule. You pay an entry fee and walk through quietly, observing routines meant to represent the ideal household. Cooking, sewing, reading, all of it slightly exaggerated, carefully curated. These displays are wildly popular. They promise insight into how others live, work, and think. You move from room to room with a program in hand, nodding appreciatively. This is learning, you insist. The fact that it feels intimate is incidental. You notice how comfortable people become when observation is sanctioned. They lean closer. They linger. They comment freely. The presence of a ticket or a sign transforms intrusion into culture. Back on the street, twilight deepens. The windows grow brighter by contrast, glowing like invitations. You catch snippets of conversation through glass and distance. Laughter, mild disagreement, the clatter of dishes. These sounds layer over one another, creating a collage of lives unfolding in parallel. There is power in watching without being seen. You are momentarily untethered from your own role. You do not have to perform. You do not have to explain. You simply witness. And yet, there is a faint discomfort beneath it all, a sense that this pleasure relies on asymmetry, that knowing more about others than they know about you creates a subtle imbalance. You push this thought aside. Overthinking ruins perfectly good pastimes. Eventually, you turn away. The spell breaks when you catch your own reflection in the glass, superimposed over someone else's life. For a moment, you see yourself as part of the display, another figure framed by light, visible and interpretable. You walk on, hands in your pockets, heart oddly quickened. Tomorrow, you will pass these same windows again. The scenes will be different. The thrill will remain, because in a world where privacy is prized and distance is polite, watching quietly becomes one of the few ways to feel connected without commitment. And everyone pretends not to notice how much they enjoy it. You discover that usefulness is deeply suspicious. Objects that serve a purpose imply efficiency, and efficiency suggests haste, which is never attractive. Instead, you cultivate an interest in things that do absolutely nothing except exist beautifully and demand attention. This is not wasteful. This is discerning. Your collection begins innocently enough. A small object caught in a shop window, smooth, polished, entirely unnecessary. You purchase it because it pleases you, and because explaining why it pleases you takes longer than buying it. This delay is important. Taste, after all, should never be rushed. Soon, one object becomes many. They gather on shelves, in drawers, arranged with careful intention. Paperweights that will never restrain paper. Miniature carvings too delicate to touch regularly. Trinkets whose original function has been lost to time, if it ever existed at all. You enjoy the ambiguity. Mystery flatters the owner. Visitors ask what they are for. You smile and say nothing helpful. The correct answer is not that they do nothing, but that they require appreciation. Appreciation is labor of a refined sort. You learn to speak about your collection fluently. You mention materials, craftsmanship, provenance. You discuss the patience required to acquire such things, the hours spent searching, waiting, selecting. Patience becomes the point. Anyone can buy something useful. It takes dedication to commit to the unnecessary. There is status in this. Not loud status, but quiet, unmistakable status. The kind that reveals itself only to those trained to notice. A guest pauses in front of a display, tilts their head, and you know they understand. This moment is worth more than any practical benefit. The objects demand care. Dusting, rearranging, occasional contemplation. You spend time with them, not because they ask for it, but because they justify it. In a world obsessed with productivity, these items carve out a space where time is allowed to pass without apology. You begin to judge others by their collections. Those who own only useful things seem hurried, incomplete. Those who collect excessively ornate but functional items are trying too hard. The ideal collection hovers just beyond purpose, balanced delicately between beauty and pointlessness. Some objects are so small they border on absurd. Tiny figurines, slivers of decorative stone, bits of metal shaped into pleasing forms. You treasure them anyway. Their insignificance is their strength. They cannot disappoint you by failing to work. You attend gatherings where collections are compared. Not overtly, that would be crude. Instead, people wander, comment lightly, ask questions meant to test knowledge. Do you know where this came from? Do you know how long it took to make? You answer calmly, because knowledge is another kind of possession. There is a thrill in acquiring something rare and useless. The search itself becomes a pastime. You frequent shops, fairs, auctions, always looking for the object that will add nothing except completeness. When you find it, satisfaction settles in quietly, like a well-placed book on a shelf. You justify the expense easily. This is investment in culture, in refinement, in the preservation of things that might otherwise be overlooked. You are a caretaker of the trivial, a curator of the unnecessary. Occasionally, doubt flickers. Someone asks again what an object does, and for a moment, you consider the question seriously. The answer remains the same. It sits, it signifies, it endures. This is enough. The collection grows until it feels like part of you. Each object reflects a choice, a moment of attention, a refusal to be efficient. Together, they form a portrait of restraint and excess intertwined. When you are alone, you sometimes rearrange everything just to see how it feels. This produces no outcome beyond the act itself. That is the appeal. In a society where usefulness is expected and idleness is feared, you have found a way to be occupied without accomplishing anything measurable, and you are very proud of that. You watch the children gather with the calm certainty that this is perfectly acceptable. Their faces are bright, eager, blissfully unaware of risk assessments or liability. The adults stand back, hands folded, offering encouragement that sounds reassuring mostly because it has been repeated for generations. This is playtime. After all, character is built here. The game is explained casually, as if nothing could possibly go wrong. Rules are simple, which is immediately concerning. Run here, climb that, jump when told, avoid whatever happens if you fail. No one specifies the consequences clearly. Mystery is part of the appeal. The children do not hesitate. They rarely do. They scramble forward, laughing, shoving, competing with a level of enthusiasm that suggests survival instincts have been temporarily overridden. You notice how high the structure is only after someone reaches the top. You notice how far the drop is only when someone looks down. Adults murmur approval. This is healthy. This builds resilience. A scraped knee is a lesson. A fall is a story. Fear is framed as excitement, and excitement is encouraged as long as it produces bravery rather than tears. Another game begins almost immediately, because momentum is important. This one involves blindfolds. Someone spins a child gently, points them in a general direction, and steps back. The objective is vague, but the laughter is loud. Obstacles are plentiful. Furniture, trees, other children. Navigation becomes guesswork. You feel a flicker of concern when someone collides with something solid. It passes quickly. The child pops back up, smiling, praised for perseverance. Pain is acknowledged only if it disrupts the fun. There are games involving speed, games involving balance, games involving heights, water, fire, or sharp edges that are described as mostly safe. And mostly is doing a lot of work here. The children accept the risks instinctively. They have not yet learned to question the rules of play handed down to them. Adults exchange knowing looks. They remember these games fondly. Memory smooths the danger into nostalgia. If they survived, surely the children will too. One activity requires running across uneven ground while holding an object that should not be dropped. The object is heavy. The ground is unforgiving. Instructions are shouted with enthusiasm. Someone trips. There is a collective intake of breath, followed by applause when they stand up again. Victory is defined narrowly. You notice how rarely adults intervene. Intervention would interrupt the lesson. The lesson is that fear is temporary and pain is negotiable. The lesson is that life does not come with padding. Some children hesitate at the edge of a challenge. They are coaxed gently, told they can do it, reminded that others already have. Peer pressure is disguised as encouragement. Eventually, they step forward, heart racing, eyes wide. When they succeed, pride floods in. When they fail, they are helped up and urged to try again later. There is a strange fairness to it. Everyone participates. Everyone risks something. No one is exempt. The rules apply equally, regardless of size or confidence. This is framed as justice. As the games continue, the adults grow more relaxed. Their initial tension fades into amusement. They laugh at near misses, They cheer daring moves. The danger becomes part of the spectacle, thrilling in a controlled, communal way. You realize that these games are not designed for safety. They are designed for transformation. Children enter cautious and leave bolder, or bruised, or both. The experience reshapes them in ways that are difficult to measure but easy to admire. Eventually, playtime ends. The children are flushed, breathless, grinning. Dirt streaks their clothes. Small injuries are catalogued proudly. Stories begin immediately, embellished with each retelling. The adults nod, satisfied. The children have played properly. They have tested limits. They have survived. As everyone disperses, you imagine explaining this to someone from another time. The heights, the risks, the lack of supervision by modern standards, the absence of helmets, warnings, or concern. It would sound reckless. Here, it sounds like childhood done right. You gather in a room deliberately dimmed, lamps turned low, not to save oil, but to encourage imagination to do the heavy lifting. Chairs are drawn close, knees almost touching, because distance dilutes impact. Someone closes the door with care, sealing the space like a container meant to hold something volatile. This is not a night for comfort. This is a night for disturbance. The storyteller does not rush. They never do. Rushing would suggest eagerness, and eagerness would feel unseemly when the goal is unease. They clear their throat, glance around the circle, and wait until the silence grows slightly awkward. Only then do they begin. The story opens gently, deceptively ordinary. A familiar setting, a routine action. You relax just enough to make what comes next effective. That is the technique. Lull first, then tilt reality a fraction to the side. Something is off. A detail does not align. A sound is described that should not be there. You notice your shoulders tighten, though you do not move. No one interrupts. Interrupting would break the spell and, worse, signal fear. Fear here must be internal, managed quietly. The listeners sit still, faces composed, hands folded or clasped loosely, pretending this is an intellectual exercise rather than a deliberate provocation. The story grows darker, not through gore or spectacle, but through implication. The unseen threat, the unresolved question, the sense that something is watching just out of reach. Your mind fills the gaps eagerly, because your imagination is far more cruel than any narrator could be. You become aware of the room in a new way, the way the light flickers, the way fabric rustles when someone shifts slightly. Every sound feels amplified, suspicious. This is intentional. The story is not confined to words. It bleeds outward, reshaping the space you occupy. The storyteller pauses at strategic moments, letting silence stretch until it presses against your ears. These pauses are as important as the plot. They give your thoughts time to wander into places you would prefer to avoid. You resist the urge to glance behind you. Resisting becomes part of the experience. Around you, others listen with the same rigid attentiveness. You can sense their reactions without looking. A shallow breath, a swallow, a subtle lean forward. Distress shared quietly feels almost communal, like a secret agreement to endure together. The tale refuses resolution. That is its greatest cruelty. Just when you expect explanation or relief, it withholds both. The ending arrives abruptly, unfinished, leaving the most important questions unanswered. The storyteller falls silent and does not immediately acknowledge the audience. For a moment, no one speaks. This is the point. The discomfort lingers, unaddressed, allowed to settle like dust. Someone eventually exhales too loudly and apologizes. Another person clears their throat and comments on the craftsmanship of the story, the cleverness of its structure. These remarks are lifelines, attempts to reframe what you feel as appreciation rather than unease. More stories follow, each one distinct, each one designed to unsettle in a different way. Some play with isolation, some with inevitability, some with the idea that the familiar is not as safe as it pretends to be. None offer comfort. Comfort would defeat the purpose. You begin to understand that these gatherings are not about fear itself, but about control. Experiencing distress on command, in a safe room with polite company, makes it feel manageable. You choose to be unsettled, and that choice matters. The storyteller watches the audience carefully, adjusting tone and pace in response. A raised eyebrow here, a lowered voice there. This is a performance calibrated to provoke without overwhelming. Too much distress would be vulgar. The goal is sustained unease, not panic. As the evening winds down, conversation resumes cautiously. People discuss themes, symbolism, historical context, anything to keep the talk safely abstract. No one admits how deeply the stories sank in. That would make the experience personal, and personal reactions are best kept private. You leave with the unsettling sense that something has followed you out. Not literally, you tell yourself, just an idea, a mood, a lingering echo of words that refuse to settle. The street outside looks the same, but you move through it differently, alert to shadows, to sounds, to the possibility that ordinary things are not entirely benign. Later, alone, you replay the stories despite yourself. They cling, precisely because they were designed to. Distress, once invited in politely, does not always know when to leave, and yet, you know you will return, because there is a strange satisfaction in being unsettled on purpose. It reminds you that you are still paying attention. You discover early that nothing is too small to matter if enough people agree to care deeply about it. A diversion becomes a discipline the moment rules are written down and someone starts keeping score. This is how reputations are made, not through grand achievements, but through obsessive devotion to things that should not carry weight, and somehow do. It begins innocently, a casual pastime mentioned in passing, a suggestion made over tea. Someone proposes adding structure, just to keep things fair. Fairness is persuasive. Soon there are guidelines, then clarifications, then debates about interpretation. By the time you realize what has happened, the activity has acquired gravity. You attend the first official gathering with mild curiosity. The room is arranged with seriousness usually reserved for negotiations. Tables are aligned precisely. Materials are inspected. Someone reads the rules aloud, not because anyone needs to hear them, but because ritual demands it. Silence follows, heavy and respectful. The task itself is trivial. Sorting something small, arranging objects by criteria no one outside the room would care about. Performing a delicate action that takes minutes at most, yet the focus applied to it is intense. Brows furrow, hands steady, breathing controlled. This is competition now. You watch as participants demonstrate their techniques. Each movement has been refined through repetition. There are preferred methods and controversial ones. Someone whispers about an incident last season that nearly caused a scandal. The stakes feel absurd and very real at the same time. When your turn comes, you feel the weight of expectations settle on your shoulders. You approach the task with care, aware that every choice is being observed. A minor mistake would be noted. A clever maneuver might be remembered. You proceed slowly, deliberately, because haste would suggest disrespect. Around you, the audience watches with restrained intensity. No one speaks. Commentary would be inappropriate. Judgment is delivered silently, through posture and expression. You finish and step back, heart beating faster than seems reasonable. Results are discussed afterward with solemnity. Scores are tallied. Performance is analyzed. Someone challenges a ruling, citing precedent. The room divides briefly, then resolves the issue through compromise that satisfies no one completely. This is taken as a sign of fairness. You learn that these competitions extend beyond the event itself. Results are remembered. Names are associated with outcomes. Invitations hinge on past performance. A careless showing can follow you for months, resurfacing in polite conversation as a cautionary tale. What makes it compelling is not the activity, but the structure wrapped around it. The certainty that effort will be measured, that skill, however narrow, will be recognized. In a world where so much is ambiguous, these small arenas offer clarity. You begin to practice at home, quietly, methodically, improving fractions at a time. You justify this easily. Mastery is admirable. Discipline is character building. The fact that the skill applies nowhere else is irrelevant. Others do the same. Entire evenings are devoted to refining technique. Notes are taken, adjustments made. The activity grows, sprouting variations and subcategories. New competitions emerge. Old ones fade. Tradition forms rapidly when people care enough. There are consequences for taking it lightly. Someone laughs during a demonstration and is met with cool glances. Another dismisses the importance of the outcome and finds themselves excluded from future events. Enthusiasm is mandatory. Irony is dangerous. You notice how pride slips in unnoticed. You identify yourself by your standing. You measure progress by comparison. You feel satisfaction when you do well and irritation when you do not. All of this over something that would sound ridiculous if explained plainly. Yet you do not explain it plainly. You describe it with care, emphasizing precision, history, and the values it represents. You hear yourself and recognize the pattern. This is how importance is manufactured. As seasons pass, the competitions continue. Minor diversions elevated into rituals. Small victories celebrated quietly. Small failures remembered longer than they should be. You participate fully, because opting out would mean admitting it never mattered, and that would unravel everything. So you keep showing up, taking small things very seriously, defending rules that exist only because you believe in them. In this way, meaning accumulates, not because it was there to begin with, but because you decided it should be. You sign your name on a membership ledger that already contains far too many signatures for something this specific. The title of the club is long, earnest, and deeply committed to precision. It references an interest so narrow that explaining it aloud would require a diagram and an apology. No one questions it. Questioning would be impolite. The meeting room smells faintly of polish and tea. Chairs are arranged in a careful semicircle, suggesting both equality and scrutiny. On a side table sit objects related to the shared obsession, laid out with reverence. You recognize some of them vaguely. Others appear to exist solely to justify the club's existence. Introductions proceed in a ritualized manner. Names are shared, followed by brief explanations of personal involvement with the interest. These explanations vary wildly in depth, but all are delivered with the same solemn enthusiasm. Years of dedication are compressed into polite sentences. Everyone listens intently, because listening is the admission price. You notice how comforting the specificity feels. Here, no one needs to justify why this matters. Everyone has already agreed that it does. The relief is immediate. Outside these walls, such passion might earn confusion. Here, it earns nods. The agenda is read aloud. It is extensive. Discussions planned, demonstrations scheduled, a debate over a minor technical distinction that has apparently divided the group for months. You feel a flicker of excitement. This is seriousness without consequence, and it is intoxicating. Someone presents first. They speak with quiet authority, gesturing toward an object that means nothing to the uninitiated and everything to this room. Terms are used freely, without explanation. You understand just enough to follow the emotional rhythm. Agreement hums. Disagreement sharpens attention. When questions are invited, they are thoughtful and precise. No one wastes time on broad ideas. Everything here is granular. Details matter. Differences of opinion are handled delicately, wrapped in courtesy, but they are real. This is not casual interest. This is identity adjacent. You realize that these clubs exist to provide permission to care deeply about something obscure, permission to spend hours refining knowledge that will never be useful in a crisis, permission to be intensely invested without irony. Refreshments are served at the appropriate moment. Conversation flows easily now, branching into subtopics that sound even more improbable. You overhear debates about variations, historical precedents, and the correct way to store items that most people would throw away without a second thought. Someone asks how you became interested. You give your origin story, modestly framed. It is received with genuine interest. Suggestions are offered, resources shared. You are welcomed, not because you are impressive, but because you are earnest. Earnestness is the true qualification. There is an unspoken agreement here that everyone will take this seriously, regardless of how strange it might appear from the outside. This mutual commitment creates a strange intimacy. You feel understood in a way that has nothing to do with friendship and everything to do with alignment. As the meeting progresses, plans are made for future gatherings, topics proposed, projects imagined. The calendar fills with events that will revolve around this one unlikely focus. You feel a quiet thrill at the thought of returning. You also notice how insulated the group is. The outside world barely intrudes. News, politics, larger concerns are politely ignored. Here, the universe narrows to a manageable scale. Problems are solvable. Debates are contained. The stakes are just high enough to matter and just low enough to be safe. At the end, formal thanks are given. Applause is restrained but sincere. The chairs are stacked. Objects are packed away with care. People linger, exchanging final thoughts, reluctant to leave the clarity of shared obsession. Walking out, you feel oddly lighter. You have spent hours focused on something that does not advance your career, improve your health, or change the world. And yet, it feels important. Because in a society that values restraint and composure, these clubs offer a sanctioned outlet for fixation. They are pressure valves disguised as organizations. You will return, not because anyone expects you to, but because you have found a place where caring deeply about something unnecessary is not just allowed, it is the entire point. You stand in a field that smells faintly of damp grass and moral superiority. Nothing is happening, which is precisely the point. You are here to watch it continue, not happening for as long as possible. Around you, other adults stand just as still, eyes lifted, faces composed into expressions of thoughtful absorption. This is leisure. This is improvement. Someone has brought a folding chair but is careful not to look too comfortable in it. Comfort suggests indulgence. Discomfort suggests virtue. You remain standing, boots sinking slightly into the soil, because standing implies engagement with the natural world, whereas sitting implies weakness of character. A cloud drifts overhead. Several people notice at once. No one speaks. Speaking would interfere with the cloud. You have been told that this is restorative. Doctors recommend it. Clergymen approve. It is said to steady the nerves and strengthen the constitution, which is useful in a century where everything else seems determined to undo you. The idea is simple. If you stare long enough at something harmless, your thoughts will behave themselves. You try to look as though you are absorbing wisdom directly from the sky. In truth, you are counting how many minutes have passed and wondering whether clouds know they are being observed. The group remains quiet, except for the occasional cough that is immediately suppressed out of politeness to the atmosphere. Nearby, a gentleman has fixated on an ant. Not ants generally, just this one. He follows its progress with the intensity usually reserved for military campaigns. Every so often, he nods, as if the ant has confirmed something important about the universe. You consider asking what, but decide against it. This is his cloud moment. Natural observation has rules, though they are never written down. You must not appear bored. You must not appear excited. Excitement would suggest that something is happening, which defeats the purpose. The ideal expression is one of mild revelation mixed with restraint, as though nature is confiding a secret you are too polite to repeat. Someone points out a bird. The group acknowledges it with reverent murmurs. Binoculars appear. Sketchbooks are opened. The bird does nothing of note. This is considered a success. You begin to understand that the less the subject performs, the more accomplished the observer becomes. Time stretches in a peculiar way. Minutes become philosophical. You notice the way light shifts across leaves, how insects conduct their business without regard for human schedules. This is framed as a lesson in humility. though it feels more like being ignored by several kingdoms at once. A lady beside you sighs softly and says she could watch the grass grow all afternoon. This is not a joke. She means it as praise. Grass is honest work, she explains. Never rushing, never complaining. You nod solemnly, as if you have not personally witnessed grass doing absolutely nothing for several hours now. There is a competitive edge to the stillness. Who can watch the longest without distraction? Who can notice the smallest change? Someone claims to have seen a flower adjust itself slightly toward the sun. This is met with impressed silence. You consider inventing an observation of your own, but fear being asked to elaborate. The restorative qualities are supposed to creep up on you. You are not meant to feel refreshed immediately. That would be suspicious. Instead, you are meant to feel subtly altered, as though your inner chaos has been gently scolded into better behavior by a shrub. At some point, you realize you have stopped thinking about yourself quite so loudly. Your worries have not vanished, but they have been crowded out by beetles and shadows and the slow performance of weather. It is not thrilling. It is not even pleasant in a conventional sense. It is quieter than that. You understand now why this passes for entertainment. In a world obsessed with decorum, watching nature offers a way to be occupied without risking enthusiasm. You can participate fully while appearing almost asleep. You can spend an entire afternoon accomplishing nothing and call it health. When the gathering finally disperses, it does so gently. No one announces an end. People simply drift away, satisfied, as though they have attended a very long sermon delivered by Moss. You leave with dirt on your boots and a strange sense of achievement. You have watched the world exist, and somehow, that counts. You step into the evening already aware that something might go wrong, and that this is precisely why you came. The invitation did not promise safety. It promised stimulation, which in Victorian terms means you may narrowly avoid disaster and be expected to discuss it politely afterward. You adjust your coat, nod to the others, and accept that tonight's entertainment hinges on the possibility of mild catastrophe. Danger, you learn quickly, is far more respectable when it wears a waistcoat. No one calls this recklessness. They call it character building. You are told that controlled peril sharpens the mind, strengthens the nerves, and gives the soul something to chew on besides routine. Someone produces a ladder that looks one thoughtful glance away from collapse. Another person volunteers to climb it. Applause follows, measured and approving. You participate in these activities with an expression of calm interest because panic would suggest poor upbringing. The goal is not to scream. The goal is to survive while maintaining posture. Whether you are riding a horse that dislikes you personally, balancing over a drop that smells faintly of damp stone, or handling an object that hisses when touched, the expectation remains the same. If you make it through, you are improved. If you do not, at least you were engaging. There is a peculiar joy in how everyone pretends the danger is incidental. Someone assures you it is perfectly safe, right before adding that one must be alert at all times. Another recounts a previous mishap with fond nostalgia, emphasizing how quickly the bleeding stopped. Laughter ripples through the group, restrained and sincere. You find yourself leaning into the experience, not because you crave harm, but because boredom has been declared the greater threat. To sit quietly at home would be to waste the evening. To tempt fate gently, with witnesses and refreshments, feels productive. You can almost hear the logic settling into place. A little danger keeps the blood circulating. Too much safety leads to moral softness. The activities escalate gradually, as though courtesy demands it. You begin with something that merely quickens the pulse, a brisk carriage ride through streets that have opinions about speed, a chemical demonstration that smells wrong but looks fascinating, a game involving sharp objects and trust. Each success emboldens the group. Each near miss becomes a story in progress. You notice how everyone watches one another closely, not with concern, but with appraisal. Who flinches? Who laughs too loudly? Who emerges flushed but composed? These details matter. They will be remembered later, possibly exaggerated, and filed away as evidence of temperament. At one point, You are convinced something truly awful is about to occur. Time slows. You become acutely aware of your hands, your breath, the way the room seems to lean in. Then it passes. Nothing breaks. No one cries out. The moment dissolves into conversation and tea, as though it never existed at all. This, you realize, is the real pleasure, the shared understanding that something might have happened and did not. The relief is subtle but intoxicating. It makes the lamps glow warmer. The voices sound friendlier. You feel briefly bonded to everyone present by the simple fact that you are all still here. There is talk of pushing things further next time. Higher climbs, faster rides, experiments that require fewer disclaimers and more optimism. You nod thoughtfully, pretending to consider the scientific merit while privately weighing your continued interest in remaining alive. By the end of the evening, you carry yourself differently. Not braver, exactly, but validated. You have looked danger in the eye, or at least in its general direction, and nothing terrible has happened. This feels like an accomplishment worth savoring. As you walk home, the ordinary street seems almost dull. Lamps stand where they always have. The ground remains solid beneath your feet. You catch yourself missing the tension already. Tomorrow, you will tell someone about tonight with careful understatement, emphasizing how perfectly reasonable it all was. After all, you did survive, and that makes it a very good night indeed. You arrive at the activity already exhausted, which is exactly how you know it is worth doing. If fun were meant to be easy, someone would have banned it by now. Instead, it has been wrapped in layers of procedure, etiquette, and arbitrary difficulty until only the truly committed remain. This is not an accident. This is design. The first rule is explained slowly, with great seriousness. It is immediately followed by a second rule that contradicts it slightly. A third rule exists only to clarify an exception that no one asked about. You nod along, pretending comprehension, because confusion is part of the initiation. If you understand too quickly, you are clearly not taking it seriously enough. The room is arranged to emphasize order rather than comfort. Chairs are placed at precise angles. Objects are laid out symmetrically, each with a purpose that will not be revealed until later. Someone carries a notebook filled with prior rulings, amendments, and a disagreement that lasted 3 years and ended with 2 people no longer speaking. You are told that the enjoyment comes from adherence, not from success, not from pleasure, but from the careful navigation of constraints. Every action requires permission. Every decision must be justified. When someone laughs too freely, a glance is exchanged. Laughter is acceptable, but only at the correct moments, and preferably for the correct reasons. You begin the activity cautiously. It would be simpler to do the obvious thing, but that would violate at least 4 guidelines and possibly a moral principle. Instead, you choose the more complicated path, pausing often to ensure compliance. Others do the same. Progress is slow, deliberate, and strangely satisfying. There is a thrill in mastering the unnecessary. You learn which movements are permitted, which words are frowned upon, which gestures suggest a lack of discipline. You watch others make mistakes and note them silently. They will be corrected, gently but firmly, because this is not about humiliation. It is about improvement through friction. At some point, you realize that the rules have eclipsed the original purpose entirely. No one remembers why this activity exists. The rules are the activity now. Debates erupt over interpretation. Precedents are cited. Someone proposes a reform and is met with polite horror. You find yourself invested, not because you are having fun in any recognizable sense, but because the effort has created stakes. To give up would mean admitting that all this attention, all this careful compliance, has been misplaced. Better to continue, to perfect your understanding, to earn your place among those who know how to enjoy things properly. The atmosphere grows intense. Minor infractions carry weight. A misplaced object, a pause that lasts too long. These are discussed at length, not to punish, but to refine the experience. Someone remarks that it used to be simpler. Everyone agrees this was a mistake. Eventually, the activity concludes, though it is unclear how. There is no signal, only a collective sense that the conditions have been met. You look around at the others. Faces are flushed, eyes are bright. No one seems relaxed, but everyone seems satisfied. You leave with a sense of accomplishment that feels disproportionate to what you have actually done. You have not created anything. You have not learned anything useful. You have, however, navigated a maze of constraints without openly rebelling, and that feels like a victory. Later, when you try to explain the evening to someone else, you struggle. It sounds unbearable when described plainly. Too many rules, too much effort, too little reward. You stop mid-sentence, realizing that this is exactly what makes it appealing. Fun, you have learned, is far more meaningful when it resists you, and you have never worked harder to enjoy yourself. You begin to notice the audience before you notice the activity. Chairs angle themselves toward you. Eyes linger a second too long. Someone adjusts a curtain, not to block the view, but to frame it better. This is supposed to be enjoyable, yet everything about it suggests documentation. You are not here to feel anything deeply. You are here to be seen, feeling something appropriately. The activity begins, whatever it is, and immediately you become aware of your posture. Are you standing with enough interest? Are your hands relaxed but not idle? Are you smiling in a way that implies appreciation without tipping into indulgence? You catch yourself performing reactions before you have them, as though your body knows the expectations even when your mind is still catching up. Conversation flows around you like a script everyone else has rehearsed. Observations are offered at regular intervals, not because they are necessary, but because silence might suggest disengagement. Laughter arrives on cue, polite and contained, the sort of laughter that reassures others you are having the correct amount of fun. Too much would be suspicious. Too little would be noted. You realize the activity itself is almost irrelevant. It could be music, or a game, or a display of mild skill. The real event is the mutual observation. Who leans in? Who claps first? Who waits just long enough to seem thoughtful? You are all mirrors now, reflecting one another's enthusiasm back and forth until it becomes self-sustaining. There is pressure to demonstrate enjoyment visibly. You nod at the right moments. You murmur approval. You adjust your expression when you sense it drifting toward honesty. Authentic reactions are risky. They are unpredictable. Performance is safer. Performance can be calibrated. At one point, you forget to react, just for a moment. Your face goes still, your mind wandering somewhere quiet. The pause feels enormous. Someone glances at you with concern. You recover quickly, offering a comment that sounds measured and sincere. The balance is restored. No one mentions it, but you feel the invisible tally mark added somewhere. You start to understand that this is not deception. No one is lying exactly. You do feel something. It is just not what is being displayed. There is a faint, constant awareness that enjoyment is being evaluated. The knowledge changes it. Like a smile held for too long, it stiffens. The most skilled participants make it look effortless. They seem naturally delighted, naturally attentive, naturally charming. You watch them closely, noticing how often they adjust, how carefully they pace their reactions. This is practice, not instinct. They have learned when to glow and when to dim. You wonder when leisure became an exhibition, when amusement required witnesses to be validated. Alone, this activity might feel flat or even pointless. Together, under watchful eyes, it becomes meaningful, not because it is better, but because it is shared and recorded in memory. There is a strange comfort in it. You do not have to decide what you enjoy. The group has already agreed. You simply align yourself with the consensus. This removes uncertainty. It also removes risk. You are unlikely to love it, but you are equally unlikely to fail. As the evening progresses, you grow tired in a specific way, not bored, not overstimulated, but gently worn down by attention. Holding yourself in this shape requires effort. You maintain interest even when your thoughts drift. You remain present even when you would prefer to disappear into the background. When it finally ends, there is relief, disguised as satisfaction. Compliments are exchanged. Remarks are made about how delightful it all was. You add your voice to the chorus, and it sounds convincing even to you. After all, nothing went wrong. You performed correctly. Later, alone, you try to recall what you actually felt. The memory is hazy. What stands out most clearly is the sensation of being watched, the awareness of alignment, the careful choreography of response. You realize then that the purpose was never enjoyment in the private sense. It was participation, visibility, proof that you were there, that you engaged, that you understood how to be seen having a good time. And somehow, that has become enough. You become aware of it the moment your enjoyment starts to crest. That quiet internal alarm that tells you something has gone a little too far. Your smile lingers a fraction too long. Your laughter escapes with too much warmth. Immediately, you adjust. You soften it. You look away. Pleasure, you have learned, is safest when it remains implied. Here, enjoyment is something to be rationed carefully, like sugar or praise. A visible excess invites questions. Raised eyebrows, concern disguised as curiosity. You feel them scanning your expression, not because they begrudge your happiness, but because happiness without moderation suggests a lack of discipline. You compose yourself, grateful that no one has had to intervene. You continue participating, of course. Participation is required. You nod, you smile, you offer small affirmations at acceptable intervals. The key is balance. You must appear engaged without seeming delighted, content without seeming thrilled. The sweet spot exists somewhere between mild approval and thoughtful restraint, and you aim for it like a practiced acrobat. Someone nearby laughs freely, just for a moment. The sound rings out too brightly. It hangs in the air. A few heads turn. The laughter fades. The person clears their throat and apologizes lightly, as if for knocking something over. Everyone pretends not to notice, which is the kindest response available. You remind yourself that this is not repression. It is refinement. Pleasure, when left unchecked, grows sloppy. It spills. It draws attention. Proper enjoyment is quiet, internal, and preferably indistinguishable from good manners. You can feel it, certainly, but you need not advertise it. You begin to monitor your reactions more closely. When something genuinely amuses you, you release it slowly, letting it register as appreciation rather than delight. When something surprises you, you acknowledge it with interest instead of joy. You have learned the difference, and so has everyone else. There is a strange pride in this control. Anyone can enjoy themselves loudly. It takes effort to do it discreetly. You observe others practicing the same restraint, each of you silently calibrating, matching the room's emotional temperature. Too cold would suggest boredom. Too warm would suggest indulgence. The goal is a comfortable, respectable, lukewarm. You notice how often people speak about pleasure as though it were dangerous. Too much of it weakens character, makes one careless, invites judgment. Enjoyment must be earned, and even then, displayed sparingly. A good time is acceptable. A great time raises concerns. At some point, you feel a genuine swell of happiness. It surprises you. The moment is small but real. For an instant, you consider letting it show, just to see what would happen. The thought passes. You smooth it down, file it away, and continue on with your composed expression intact. The room hums with this collective self-regulation. Everyone is enjoying themselves just enough. No more, no less. It creates a strange harmony. No one is miserable. No one is ecstatic. This is considered ideal. You overhear a conversation where someone remarks that the evening is quite pleasant. The phrasing is deliberate. Quite pleasant. Not wonderful. Not delightful. Pleasant suggests approval without risk. You make a mental note to use it later. As the event winds down, you feel a quiet fatigue settle in. not the exhaustion of boredom, but the weariness of constant adjustment. Holding pleasure at arm's length requires attention. You have been alert all evening, watching yourself as closely as anyone else might. When you finally leave, the night air feels different, freer. There is no one to observe your reaction to it. You allow yourself a deeper breath. Your shoulders relax. The enjoyment you denied earlier surfaces briefly, unobserved and unmeasured. You smile, just for yourself. And then, instinctively, you check that no one is watching. You imagine them standing just behind you, quietly horrified but deeply attentive, not shouting, not gasping, simply watching with that particular Victorian focus that feels like being measured for a coffin while still alive. You picture their posture first, upright, expectant, ready to judge without wasting energy on obvious reactions. They observe what you call fun and do not immediately dismiss it. That surprises you. They lean in, figuratively and emotionally, trying to understand the rules, or the lack of them. The absence alone troubles them. You can feel it. Fun without structure looks suspiciously like chaos. Chaos leads to moral erosion. Moral erosion leads to newspapers. They notice how little effort is required, how quickly amusement arrives, how no one appears to be suffering for it. This unsettles them deeply. Pleasure without friction seems unfinished, like a sentence without punctuation. You can almost hear the internal concern forming. Where is the self-improvement? Where is the character building? Why is no one exhausted afterward? They watch people laugh openly, loudly, without first checking who might overhear. That part truly alarms them. Laughter is supposed to be filtered, directed, used sparingly. Here it spills everywhere, unchaperoned, unrefined, possibly contagious. They exchange looks that say this would never be allowed indoors without supervision. They take note of the speed. Everything happens so fast. Entertainment arrives instantly, ends instantly, and leaves no visible mark. No stories worth retelling in careful language. No bruises. No mild existential fatigue. They worry something important is being skipped. A process. A lesson. Some form of dignified discomfort. Yet they keep watching. They notice something else too. The ease. The way people enjoy themselves without needing permission. The absence of social penalties for visible delight. This confuses them in a way that is almost painful. They were taught that joy must be earned and then restrained. Here it appears freely available. Like tap water. They would call it indulgent, excessive, potentially dangerous. But beneath that, you sense curiosity. They wonder what it feels like to enjoy something without defending it, without justifying it as educational or improving or character forming. The thought unsettles them because it is tempting. They observe how modern fun does not require witnesses to be valid. People enjoy things alone, quietly, sincerely. This feels wrong to them, but also strangely intimate. Fun that exists without being seen feels rebellious, powerful. They are not sure whether to condemn it or admire it. You imagine one of them clearing their throat and offering a careful remark, something like, "It does appear pleasant," high praise, delivered with visible effort. Another might mention concern about moderation, about balance, about what happens when joy is no longer rationed, but you sense they are not entirely convinced by their own objections. They would certainly criticize the lack of danger, no controlled peril, no risk that proves fortitude. That part disappoints them. Surviving an evening without incident feels wasteful. They believe a good time should at least flirt with mild catastrophe. And yet, they watch you enjoying something fully, briefly, without apology. They see the way it does not undo you, the way you return intact, perhaps even lighter. This does not fit their expectations. They were warned that pleasure weakens people. You seem fine, better than fine. They might not approve, but you sense something else beneath the judgment. Validation. Not that their standards were correct, but that their suspicions were understandable. They spent their lives building elaborate systems to control joy because they believed it mattered. Watching you disregard those systems does not feel insulting. It feels instructive. You imagine them stepping back, folding themselves into memory, carrying this image with them, a world where fun does not require effort to justify its existence, a world that survives anyway. You feel oddly comforted by their imagined disapproval. It confirms that you are doing something different, something lighter, something that does not need to prove itself. And for a moment, you enjoy that thought without restraint. You step out of the century without ceremony. There is no portal, no dramatic shift in light, just a subtle loosening of rules you did not realize were wrapped around you so tightly. One moment you are surrounded by etiquette, structure, and carefully justified amusements, and the next you are back where you started, holding the quiet awareness that nothing has actually changed as much as you expected. The present hums around you, loud and casual and unconcerned with appearances. People enjoy things openly now, or at least they pretend to. They scroll, they laugh, they binge, they relax without first constructing a moral argument for why it is allowed. And yet, you notice the same old patterns hiding beneath the surface, wearing different clothes. Fun is still being explained, still defended, still packaged as productive, deserved, earned. It just uses different language now. Self-care, wellness, optimization, balance. The Victorians would have loved the terminology. It has rules, it has hierarchy, it has guilt management built right in. You recognize the familiar tension immediately. The careful calibration of enjoyment, the subtle fear of appearing too pleased, the instinct to justify leisure by attaching it to growth, health, or some vague promise of becoming better later. The century may have changed, but the discomfort around unearned joy feels remarkably intact. You remember how they stood still watching clouds and called it restorative. You smile, thinking of how people now sit still watching screens and call it mindfulness. The object has changed. The impulse has not. Humans still need permission to stop moving, to stop striving, to stop proving something to someone. You think about danger as entertainment, about rules designed to make pleasure feel serious, about performance masquerading as participation. You see it everywhere now, in hobbies turned into side hustles, in relaxation tracked by devices, in fun that must be shared, posted, reviewed, or improved upon. Somewhere along the way, the excuse changed, but the need for one never disappeared. You realize that every era believes it has finally figured out how to enjoy itself correctly. Every era is wrong in its own special way. The Victorians wrapped their fun in discipline because they feared chaos. The present wraps it in convenience because it fears stillness. Both are uneasy with the idea of enjoyment existing for no reason at all. You feel oddly comforted by that. It means the confusion is not personal. It is inherited. You remember how carefully you regulated your reactions back then, how you watched yourself being watched. You catch yourself doing the same thing now, just faster, quieter, more efficiently. The audience may be invisible, but it is still there, somewhere between expectation and habit. For a moment, you consider what it would look like to enjoy something without explanation. No improvement, no outcome, no record, just the act itself, experienced and then allowed to pass. The thought feels both simple and strangely radical. You do not fully commit to it. Not yet. Old instincts die slowly, but you notice them now. You see the shape of them. You recognize the way fun has always been strange, always been negotiated, always been something humans circle carefully before allowing themselves to touch. The Victorians did not invent weird leisure. They just formalized it. You did not escape it by leaving their century. You brought the awareness with you. That is the difference. You step forward anyway, back into your own time, carrying the quiet understanding that joy has never been the problem. The explanations have, and maybe, just maybe, you can leave a few of them behind.